The March 22nd, 2016 Methacton School District Board of School Directors meeting is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, you start us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hi everyone! My name is Kenny Barber. I'm happy to be here tonight to represent Woodland Elementary School. I'm a 4th grader at Woodland. I wanted to tell you how I feel about school and what makes it great. Woodland makes learning fun. All of the teachers are fun, flexible, fair, helpful, kind, and supportive, and that makes learning so much easier. We get smarter every day and in every way. Our teachers try really hard to make learning fun, and they do a great job of it. We have many assemblies, educational games to play, and lots of technology opportunities to practice and learn things. Woodland is a nice place. We are also nice to each other. Mrs. Zemer, our counselor, is always talking to us, and she teaches us lessons, important lessons about friendship, confidence, and feelings, and those are important lessons. We have also learned about integrity. The first thing Mrs. Bender, my 4th grade teacher, taught us was integrity. Integrity is not how you act when others are around, but how you act when no one is around. No one's perfect, not even the teachers. We are all trying hard to do our best. There is so much fun stuff and so much educational stuff here at Woodland. If you haven't visited, please do. Thank you.
Hold on. Both of you, we have certificates for you, so if you'll come out front here, we'll take a couple pictures. All right, Gwendolyn and Ken, these certificates make you official junior school board members. Are you ready to take on all the responsibilities of being junior school board members?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Mm-hmm. Okay, you can handle the job?
Maybe.
Oh, all right. Here you go. Thank you. Here, hold on. I gotta stand up straight, so I'm taller than you.
Thank you so much to the Kaufman and the Barber family for bringing their children this evening. Again, this is going to be a continuation every month. We look to showcase students from all of our buildings. Likely we'll get through the remaining elementary schools this school year, and we look forward to continuing the practice in the future. But we think it's important that everyone recognizes that we are doing some great things here, a lot of great things here at Methacton School District, and it was a testament to the young man's words here this evening, how good Woodland is doing for him and the rest of the children at Woodland. So with that said, I'll turn them back over to the president.
Thank you. Just by way of announcements, the board is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Also, we had an executive session which was held on February 25th, 2016 for matters of administrative personnel. Let me look. Yes, all the board members are present and with us today. Now we'll turn it over to Dr. Zerbe to talk about some recognitions of guests and scheduled speakers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I do that, it is with great sadness that I inform you that one of our Eagleville teachers, Miss Becky Gulliford, passed away on Sunday, March 20th, following a lengthy illness. Ms. Gulliford was employed as a teacher in the Methacton School District for over 20 years. She was a warm, caring, and devoted teacher who was loved by students, families, and staff. Please join me in a moment of silence in recognition of this tremendous loss. Thank you. There are no guest speakers scheduled for this evening. We had 2 presentations from the work session last week that are moved to old business, and those items are up for discussion when we get to that point in the agenda. Therefore, I'll turn it over to the board president for reports.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with Mr. Ryan in the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met on March 9th at 7:30 p.m. All members of the Finance Committee were in attendance. That night there were 6 items up for discussion. The first of which was the debt refunding and debt restructuring. In terms of the debt refunding, it's been completed for the general obligation bond series of 2009, showing an estimated savings of $3.8 million over the next 10 years. In terms of the debt restructuring, it was discussed and committee recommended presentation to the full board at last week's work session. Debt restructuring would lessen our overall local debt effort for each of the next 9 years by roughly $575,000. However, by using this type of wraparound debt restructuring, significant increased payments would occur in the years 2026, 2027. The years where our local debt effort would have seen a significant drop-off in debt payments. More about that will be discussed during old business this evening. The second topic was a presentation given by Mr. Bob Schock about our transportation route review. It was a very good presentation with several recommendations to help the district save money going forward. This was also briefly discussed at the work session and will be discussed again tonight during old business. The third item was the monthly financial reports, which were reviewed by Mr. Whiteleather and the Finance Committee. There were several questions and discussions regarding the list of bills and year-to-date analysis and projections moving forward. The fourth item up was the employee medical draft waiver. This was discussed and the administration actually recommended to remove this option as a possible savings for the current, for the next fiscal budget. The reason for this was there was a possibility that it could actually wind up costing the district money instead of saving us money if things didn't go exactly as planned. The Finance Committee agreed with this recommendation and has been removed. There was a budget presentation that was made. Some of the public saw this at the Finance Committee, and then again it was presented at the work session. There will be much more discussion about that this evening during old business. Basically, the administration has put forth 3 options. The school board can take either Act 1 plus the exceptions, Act 1, or 0% tax increase. Each of these would require 0 to varying levels of potential program cuts needed if we don't seek the full Act 1 plus exceptions. The next item that was discussed was the North Monco roof replacement. That was reviewed by Mr. Whiteleather, and the Finance Committee moved forward for full board review and vote. Mr. Whiteleather will have more about this during his financial reports. And finally, several members of the public had a chance to speak at public comment time. Some of the questions were around bond restructuring, staffing, the high school scheduling, bus review, fund balance, and the potential negative impact on our credit rating by using fund balance last year. And that is my report.
All right, thank you. We'll move right on to the Property Committee. Mr. Dorn.
Okay, thank you. We also met on March 9th at 6:30. Present was Ms. Larzanese, myself, Dr. Zerby, Mr. Whiteleather, and Mr. Fretz. Mr. Phillips and Mr. Roth were absent. The following things were discussed. The use of facilities update. So we talked about the software the school district uses to schedule events across all of our facilities and fields in the district. And we talked about a potential new fee schedule that is being developed. We asked Dr. Zerby and Mr. Fretz to come back to us in the May meeting with what those proposals would be. After we review them at committee and at the board, we'll then socialize them publicly. Dr. Zerby is also having discussions with some of the groups within the communities that are large users of our facilities. We also discussed the facility-wide assessment update. At that time, we were about 2/3 of the way through all of the buildings in the school district. They're expected to finish them in March here, and then bring a review to the committee on April 13th, after which we'll decide what direction to take on the results. So this study is giving us an analysis of all of our buildings across the districts and what their needs will be over a certain time frame, so 0 to 5 years, 5 years to 10 years, 10 years plus, so that we can take that information and put it into our budgeting model as well as our strategic plan for the school district. The next item that was discussed was the building entrance update. We've asked Mr. Fretz to bring back some hardware options to the committee so we can review those. But basically what we're looking to do is improve our security, the entrance to our buildings from a security perspective so that potential visitors don't have immediate access into the building kind of as their first line of defense. So we've got a couple of schools that this is an issue, and we're looking at these solutions to rectify the situation. It will probably be a combination of hardware, mechanical, as well as process change for the various buildings. Next item discussed, Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Fretz gave us an update, as well as our contact from our consultant gave an update on the Fields project. For the most part, the fields are done. There's some remedial action on the softball field that was necessary that's considered an interim fix right now. We'll see how well the interim fix works and decide what we need to do further. There's some punch list items that now that spring has come that will be addressed along with some landscaping. And then additionally, there's some issues with a retention basin with how water is dealt with on site that still needs an additional bit of engineering and planning to find a permanent solution to the issue. So we're marching through it. I guess the other update that the community should know and you may have noticed it, is all the lights are erected. And we've been running the lights during the daytime. We're required to do a burn-in period from a mechanical perspective, so there's about a 10-day period that the lights need to be on. It's a certain amount of hours, actually, we need to do before that we fully accept the lights from the electrical contractor as a finished product. The next item, Mr. Whiteleather reviewed the Lower Providence sewer bill with us and what they were doing to make sure that the billing was in line with the usage that we had at our various buildings. And he continues to work with the sewer authority on that. And then we had courtesy of the floor, and we had a couple of questions regarding both the sewer bill and the sewer authority, as well as the retention basin. And that concluded our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dorn. And now on to the Education Committee.
We met on March 14th. Everyone was in attendance, including, or in addition to, was Cindy Golden, one of the math support teachers, as well as Judy Landis, high school principal. First was the Methacton Digital Learning and Instructional Evolution presentation. Basically, Mr. Cisnovic and Ms. Landis gave a detailed report of the one-on-one Chromebook pilot that's been going on at the high school. And I don't want to steal their thunder for next month, but for those of you unaware, the pilot is a one-on-one Chromebook across core subjects and across grades. And it was suggested that the presentation of the pilot be moved ahead to the April board work session. Next on our agenda was the curriculum approval, basically update on modifications of 7 high school math courses, which you see on the agenda. Next was the textbook recommendations. There were 7 different textbook recommendations, which is also on your agenda. It was decided on that Monday evening that it should be presented the next night at the board work session to talk more in specifics about the K-4 and 7-8 math, which thank you, Dr. Katona, and the two math support teachers for getting that together on such short notice. And we had a lengthy conversation at the work session, and we will be voting on that this evening. Next, Dr. Engstad gave an update of the contingency fund update and an overview of the elementary and secondary counseling program. Enrollment data was reviewed like it is every month, and there was no comment from during courtesy of the floor. And we adjourned at 9 p.m.
Thank you. And now an update on the policy committee, please.
Thank you. The policy committee met on March 15th, 6:30 p.m. The full committee was in attendance, as well as Dr. Zerbe. We had 9 policies up for discussion. We were able to get through 4 of them. 3 of them have been placed on hold for right now for various reasons, and 2 were moved to the April agenda because we just ran out of time. Of the 4 that were discussed, we had some recommended changes that Dr. Zerbe was going to bring forward to our April meeting with revisions. Actually, I have a correction for the agenda tonight because one of those was placed here for first reading, but we had actually decided that we were going to move it forward for further discussion and policy. And then we had 4 policies under 5-year review. We were able to work through all 4 of them. 2 of them were moved to first reading with revisions, and the other 2 were moved to first reading as is. There were no comments under courtesy of the floor, and we adjourned at 7:30.
All right, thank you. And now an update on the intermediate unit.
Thank you. The intermediate unit met on March 22nd, 2016. We meet the day after our board meeting, so we'll have a meeting tomorrow night. The legislative breakfast is on April 8th. This is an opportunity for board members to meet with legislators and to gain an understanding of current issues facing them, primarily in Harrisburg. The Pre-K Counts program planned to open its doors on February 29th, hoping to provide 70 days of the program, which is the required amount during the current fiscal year. This program had originally been scheduled to run for the full year, but because of budget, it didn't happen, and it also had been expected to be larger. Students from the Norristown Area School District have been given priority for enrollment in this program. Many of you may fondly recall the old IU building located at 1605 West Main Street in Norristown. It was the headquarters of the MCIU and where programs were held for many years. It's been vacant since the IU moved to the new building on Lafayette Street in Norristown. While the IU has been interested in selling the property, there has been no interest in the market. So with the acquisition of the Head Start program at the beginning of this school year and the recent approval of the Pre-K Counts program, it was decided to reopen the Main Street building to house these programs. Little wrinkle is that state law prohibits the IU from owning buildings in which there are classroom programs. So the IU is selling for $1 its Main Street building to the State Public School Building Authority and will lease it back for a rental of $1 per year. And election of members of the MCIU board will take place in the next few months. There are 6 districts which will be nominating a member of their board for a seat on the MCIU board. They will submit their nominees, and all districts, including us, will be expected to vote on the nominees probably at our May meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now an update on North Monco Technical Career Center.
Okay, we had a meeting last night, actually, and primary topic of the meeting was the roof replacement, and the project was updated. The architect gave us a good update. They basically, at the request of the JOC, was to really vet out the low bidder a little bit more, which with good due diligence we got good results from. Apparently, the low bidder, Lariat Construction Company, is very selective on the jobs they do, so that's why they did not have the resume of jobs that a lot of the other companies did. They are a smaller company, but they're very detail-oriented. So the total of the roofing project will be $978,390. not to exceed $1.1 million in total costs. They did add on the alt bids dollars, which would extend the roof life to a 30-year system, also with adding more insulation to it. They talked about hiring an owner's rep, basically, to come out as well, which was, agreed upon. That was a good idea. Basically, that was about all that we talked about. We did approve the roof replacement project with that dollar amount. We also approved Fox Rothschild as a solicitor. And should also note that Jeff Sultanic has been the solicitor for the Tech Center for 25 years. And did not know it that long, but he has extensive knowledge there, and it was voted unanimously to make him the solicitor again. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. And now from our student representatives.
Thank you. Earlier this month, producer James Wahlberg came to the high school and showed If Only, his short film that aims to, quote, raise awareness about the dangers of prescription drug misuse and abuse. Students appreciated having another conversation about the dangers of substance abuse and expressed a desire for more conversations like this, especially with community members who can share their own experiences. And March 11th marked the third annual Methacton Mini-Thon, based off of the larger Penn State University event. Thon is not only a dance marathon, but also a year-long effort to raise funds and awareness for the fight against pediatric cancer. The week leading up to Mini-Thon was the Spirit Week, with themes like America Day, College Day, and Superhero Day. Events at Methacton's Mini-Thon included Zumba, dodgeball, karaoke, and of course, dancing. At the end of the night, it was revealed that Methacton raised $40,825.84.
Thank you, Tara. Over this month, the Science Fair team had great success in MCSRC's Science Fair, with many students placing first, second, and third place prizes. Methacton as a district won first place in Divisions B, C, and D, as well as placing second in Division A. These awards are given to the school who get the most points based on how the students place, which alludes to how well our students did this Science Fair. In robotics, the sophomore team was able to advance to the state level of robotics competition, even defeating our senior class, which shows the excellent progress the school has made in integrating computer technology and education in our district. This week, we look forward to seeing how MCRC students who have placed first, second, and third, how they do in Delaware Valley Science Fair next week, and see if they can advance to the Intel Show Science Fair. Overall, great success. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the communications, Ms. Lynch.
Good evening. I'm going to use a little bit of my time to once again plug the Education Foundation for the Methacton community's support of the arts in Methacton by encouraging you all to attend the annual Art Corks and Forks event on Monday, April 4th. I remind you that 100% of the proceeds from this year's amazing event will go to offset the costs of the Methacton High School Marching Band's trip to Florida to perform at the Outback Bowl. With a group of 6, tickets are just $30. Methacton's Summer Community Education Programming registration has begun, with online registration available for a variety of programs, including basketball, field hockey, cheerleading, chess, science, cooking, crafting, and more. There's a button on our homepage to allow families to register today. And today was Arcola Intermediate School's annual STEAM Career Day, featuring careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, with an additional focus on careers involving the arts and how they support STEM fields. The day started with a keynote address by paleontologist Carrie Woodruff, who acted as scientific advisor for the film Jurassic World. Woodruff is an adjunct instructor in paleontology at the Department of Earth Sciences at Montana State University. More than 50 other presenters from local employers and schools spoke to students about careers in the variety of fields, including data analysis, as Mr. Boardman did, technology, engineering, medicine, robotics, law enforcement, healthcare, and environmental research, among others, through presentations and hands-on activities. Photos can be seen on our website and were distributed via social media today. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do have tickets for the event up here. I have no shame when it comes to selling tickets. I'll turn it over to Dr. Zerby now for this.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 4 items that I want to share with the board and the public. One will be the release of the RFP for enrollment projections, and second, an update on the field project. Thirdly, an update on strategic planning, and lastly, goal setting. So the release of the RFP, please be advised that the district released a request for proposal for an enrollment study on March 14th, 2016. We distributed the RFP to over 20 vendors that deal with enrollment projections and posted the RFP and the listing of those vendors to the district's website. The vendor responses are due by March 31st. I have reached out to the subcommittee on enrollment to assist with the review of the submissions to determine the finalists to progress forward with the process, which is intended to conclude with the recommendation to the board for the April 19th work session and the potential approval at the April 27th Board of School Directors voting meeting. On to the field update. Mr. Dorn mentioned several things, so I may repeat some things, but Methacton School District Field Project has seen the auxiliary field and the stadium fields illuminated this past week as we work through the manufacturer's installation process of light burn-in prior to the township's testing. We continue addressing matters on the 2 softball fields. While there are numerous issues with the varsity and JV softball fields, Mr. Dorn mentioned the major ones. We are working through them at the moment in a manner that allows our athletes access while providing some temporary fixes. The athletic director and the director of facilities are working through some issues to ensure that our student athletes are taken care of while we work these issues out. In addition, most of the areas disturbed by the construction is being reseeded for grass by the general contractor at no cost to the district, since their first pass of grass seeding was unacceptable. Next, strategic planning update. The Methacton administration has been working on the strategic planning objectives and strategies associated with the goals as defined by the Strategic Planning Committee. That's a committee of about 80 within the Methacton community. We are working towards providing a finalized draft to the committee by April 7th with hopes that we can finalize a product to come forward to the board at our April 11th, 2016 meeting. Ms. Lynch is working with members of the administration on the document presentation and the implementation program associated with the enculturation of the mission, vision, core values, and goals going forward. We are excited about the future of this district, and this plan will represent that excitement. Lastly, goal setting. In speaking about strategic planning process, it is important that I suggest to the board that it would best serve the administration work if we could utilize the framework around the strategic plan and begin discussing the board and superintendent goals for the 2016-2017 school year. It is my recommendation that we establish our goals cooperatively by the end of May 2016 for the following school term so that the administrative team can focus in their June retreat to build off of those goals. I recommend that we begin this discussion at our work session of the board in April, and we finalize the board's and superintendent's goals by the end of May of this calendar year. In the meantime, I will forward the board the current draft goals related to the strategic planning process at this point as a starting point for our discussion. And that ends my report.
Thank you. And now we'll do a public comment related to board action items. If you want to speak about anything other than the board action items, it would be appropriate to come forward and speak about that at the end of the meeting at the courtesy of the floor. Okay? Anybody?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I see on this has issue with item 10, number 1 and number 2. There's 2 professional development leaves being approved, compensated professional development leaves. One is for Allison Crowley, a science teacher at the high school. The other is a compensated professional development leave for a Regina Shoneman, the grade 2 instructor at Worcester. I was just wondering if we can get a little more detail on what these teachers will be doing as far as professional development, and is this their sabbaticals, so to speak, and whether or not they're getting a full salary or a half salary. I just wonder if we can get a little more detail on what the professional development is.
Mr. Harney, do you have any additional detail to share?
Sure. Yeah, these are more commonly known as sabbaticals. There's actually two kinds under the school code. You've got the professional development and health restoration. This would be the professional development where they have to submit a plan. For the full year, it's 18 credits. For the half year, it's 9 credits, and they submit a plan to us as to what they want to study during that time period. Most of them in the beginning, for the first half of the year, can give us specifics with actual course numbers. A lot of times colleges don't issue that, so the plans will morph into this is what I want to take and the general areas that they want to go into, and then they give us the specifics on the actual course numbers when they are available. So the plans are submitted along with their requests.
Ashley? And I do have your tickets here, and I'm going to come after the money, okay?
Hi, Ashley Wilkerson from Audubon. I'd like to address under number 11 the curriculum and programs, the item under textbooks available for review. And I'm actually not here speaking for myself tonight so much as for my son, who asked me to come here and speak on his behalf. He is a 6th grader at Skyview, and he used the everyday math curriculum in grades 1 through 5. And he has given me permission to say that he is not somebody for whom math will ever be his easiest subject. It's one he really has to work at. And grades 1 through 5, he would tell you that he hated math, it was hard, and he was going to be glad when he never had to do it again. We spent a lot of time going over things. We struggled especially with the spiral curriculum because he was the one who, whenever there was a Part B, which was developmentally perhaps not appropriate for many of the kids at that grade level, he would struggle to understand it. He needed help with fluency, which was not emphasized, and he's a kid who really excels in programs which emphasize mastery. So fast forward to this year at Skyview, where they did a great job of test driving several math programs and implemented a new curriculum. My son likes math this year. He thinks it's easy, he thinks it's good at it. He won an award last quarter for math. Not because this is an easier curriculum. I think that if you spoke with the teachers, they would tell you the same thing they told me, which is that it was more challenging than everyday math when they implemented it, and they were really worried about how the kids were going to do. But once they got it, they really did a better job of learning and mastering the material, and that's certainly what we've seen in our house. So relating that back to the items on the agenda for the K through 4 curriculum, he and I are both really excited to see something on there that will eliminate the spiral curriculum and emphasize mastery, because we've certainly seen that work in our house. And he's also really excited to see that there's the potential for the curriculum he's currently using to be extended to grade 7 and 8, where he's going to be next year at Arcola, because he's been really successful, and like I said, he likes math and he's doing it this year, so he hopes you will consider implementing those curricula. Thanks.
Thank you. John?
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. As usual, there are some things on the list of bills that draw my attention. On the general fund account, page 5, the first student bill for the month of January of $500,000 or so, and the text says include medical benefit. The first student employees are not Methacton employees, so I have a hard time with the medical benefit as part of that bill payment, as explicitly stated. So I guess I can get an answer next week if I submit a written request. But you'll be voting on it this evening.
Mr. Angelo, sometimes I'm not certain that you're asking a question. You're making a statement, so are you asking a question?
I'm asking
Do you
a
want
question,
more information
but
related?
I'm not, I'm not expecting an answer.
Would you like an answer?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Whiteleather?
As part of the contract that we developed and solicited out to vendors, the contractor, any employee that was an existing employee of the Methacton School District that migrated over to a first student employee, we are responsible for a portion of their health insurance, which is part of first student's bill to the school district. That is encapsulated within each month's bill. There is the bill for the transportation, the buses, and salaries and such associated with first student's operation. There's also those people that are grandfathered employees. We pay for the portion of their health insurance as long as they remain employee of first student. Once the grandfathered employee leaves, retires, whatever the case may be, there is no further cost incurred by the Methacton School District for health insurance for that employee.
Thank you. On page 8, there's a medical reimbursement hospital copay for a named employee, and instead of it being $1,000 or less, it's $1,375. And I thought that the agreement with administrators had a limit of $1,000.
There's two different provisions that are available for employees that are part of our health insurance. You are correct that our administrative employees do get reimbursement up to $1,000 for non-covered medical costs, copays, deductibles, etc. The second provision of our agreements that are applicable to all of our employee classifications are emergency room visits. If you are admitted to the hospital, there is a portion that you, as the employer, are responsible for. As part of our collective bargaining agreements, we do reimburse those employees for that cost.
Again, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Brian.
Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. Regarding item 13C, the graduation date, based on what I read here, am I correct that there will be no rain date for graduation?
I'll answer your question in a second, but I also want to make people aware that as the commencement exercise motion reads here, it reads for a 5 p.m. It's actually going to be recommended this evening based on feedback from our students that it'll be 4 p.m. So I just want to make everybody aware of that in case anybody wants to comment on before we get to that item. Okay, now to answer your question, there is no additional date, so we will be monitoring the weather like we've done in past years, where the date is recommended right now for Friday, June 10th. And if it is going to rain, we will move the graduation indoors.
Okay.
So there's no additional date.
So if graduation is moved indoor, how many attendees from each family would be able to attend?
Typically, in the past, when we've held it indoors, there were 2 tickets for inside the gymnasium, and then all other extended family beyond those 2 tickets were provided access into a live stream to other rooms within the building.
So it's unlimited other places in the building?
That is correct, as well as we've streamed it on our cable access network as well. So, in fact, I've told that people have watched it in restaurants within the district.
Okay.
Not that we're recommending that, it's just...
No, I understand.
It's an option.
And I think it was more than just restaurants as well, I just didn't want to say where. So let me ask this, one last follow-up question is, in years past, I think it was 2 years ago, we had all that snow, and I brought this up at the work session as well, there was an effort made to move in-service dates to accommodate a preferred date. Was there any effort made on your part or the administration's to try to do something similar to provide for a rain date? I mean, I understand that you're providing extra accommodation with closed-circuit television, which is great, but it's a difference between seeing it live for certain family members versus seeing in a room either at a pub or in a classroom. So
Well, the consideration is this. We've certainly thought through all the variables, and I can tell you that there's no one recommendation that's going to satisfy all of our families. What we're trying to do is provide the best opportunity for most of our families to enjoy the graduation. We've sought input from our student body. I'm making the recommendation on a number of things based on the fact that I can now reasonably predict when the last day of school will be, and based on the fact that, doing a graduation earlier than Friday would cost the district a loss in subsidy. And therefore, the recommendation is clear that, Friday makes the most sense. It's responsive to the most of our students and responsive to most of our parents. Certainly, some consideration we've talked about, what about a weekend graduation? Well, that's not going to be conducive for a lot of families because, they want to graduate and they want to, have their graduation and their family together. We think that this Friday provides a single opportunity for people to make plans, whether indoors or outdoors, and it provides them one opportunity to make those plans, travel, and celebrate such a great opportunity to be with their nephews, nieces.
My last point is that you just mentioned surveying parents. I mean, unless I missed it somehow, I don't think anything.
I didn't say survey.
You said input from parents. And I don't know how you gather that input. But
I didn't say input from parents. If I did, rewind the tape.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We did not do that.
Any other comments? Candy.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. The textbooks that are available for review, the Math in Focus, the Singapore Math, the cost is $151,000, but it doesn't say how many copies that are being bought. The other books, it's listed how many copies. So I'm just curious how many copies they're getting for $151,000.
What we'll do, since these textbooks are not being approved this evening, they're on notice so that they're going to be available for 30 days' notice. We will update these items to make sure that it reflects that request.
So the
okay, we know the number. I just don't know the number off the top of my head, but we'll add it so that it's on the agenda for the actual vote at the next month's meeting.
All right, because I just noticed that the other books are they're right.
Great point.
Okay. On the list of bills, I was just curious for, you have the Town Book Center, which is in Collegeville, and English books were bought for $3,000. Why would we go to a retail bookseller to buy books? What, we get it wholesale price? I mean, I'm just curious why we went through a bookstore for English books. I mean, these books we went through, books.
Anytime we look to have supplemental materials, what we would do is look to multiple external providers, whether it be local or through internet providers, something along that line, Amazon as one example, and providing how many copies would be necessary to either supplement an existing set of textbooks or books were lost, destroyed, or some other means that we would need to replace those. We would utilize a vendor, in this case is a local one, to purchase those additional materials that would be needed within the classroom.
So can I ask, did you get the education discount? Because they do give an educational discount. They give it to teachers and people in the school district. So if you didn't, you might want to look into that, because they do give educational discount. My other question, you have a couple payouts for public school employees. One was to someone from 1993 to 1994, which was over $1,900. You have someone, you see here, there was at least three. One was for $16,000. And it says FUPT. Can you explain that? Because the one year is from 1988 to 1991. And the other one was like $199. So I'm just curious that these dates are far back, and they're being paid now, what they're being paid for.
You're speaking of what happens when an employee, Peaser's allowed employees to purchase part-time service from basically going back to essentially day one when they started. That allowance has since closed, but Peaser's is in the process of calculating how much is owed, not only from the employee, but also from the employer. So when we have a purchase of part-time service, we as the employer are responsible for a portion of those costs as that calculated amount of credit. The employee is also responsible for a portion of that, which is generally taken out as a payroll deduction. So there's two sides of the equation. Depending on the amount of part-time service that they had accrued leading up to the purchase, like you said, like you're referencing, it can range from minor amounts to more significant amounts.
Because I noticed the date, so it seems like we're paying something that should have been paid years ago, so we're basically on the hook for it, so to speak.
Well, Peaser's eligibility kicks in after a certain number of days or hours worked. Part-time service that did not qualify for pension within a given year was then not paid from the employer and the employee. However, when the option was available here recently to purchase that part-time service, all that cumulative net effect of all of that service was pulled together. And in a case where somebody would have a extended tenure of this service that would not have otherwise qualified, it can lead to a significant payment amount that we as Methacton would be responsible for that employee. And as I said, the employee would also be responsible for that portion.
It said like from 1988 to 1991, and I'm looking at 16,000. That's a lot of money for something that was almost 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more comment? All right, let's move right along. So item number 8, may I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for work session held on February 16th, 2016, and the board meeting held February 23rd, 2016. Split it up? Okay. So may I have a motion for the minutes from the work session? First, second? So I have a first and a second. Are there any comments from the board on the work session minutes? Okay. All those in favor? Okay. That passes by a vote of one no, a vote of 8-1. May I have a motion to approve the board minute meetings for the February 23rd, 2016 board motion? Second. Any comments? Okay. All those in favor? That approves unanimously, 9-0.
Just make a statement that Phillips was a no vote for the...
Okay. To note, for the record, Jim Phillips was the one no vote for the vote on the work session minutes. Both of those have passed. Approve the board minute meetings for both the work sessions and the board meeting. Let's move right on to fiscal items. I'll turn that over to Mr. Whiteleather.
Thank you. 3 items on for your consideration for approval this evening. The list of bills has been reviewed and approved by Finance Committee, as well as reviewed at our workshop meeting last week, is on for your approval, as well as our Treasurer's report through the same process with our Finance Committee, as well as reviewed last week's workshop meeting. And then finally, as Mr. Roth spoke about, on for your consideration this evening is the North Montco roof replacement resolution. The impact to the Methacton School District as a result of this approval this evening will be amount of $67,450, of which it is a recommendation of the administration to take this amount from our fund balance, since it is a one-time expense, is on for your consideration this evening. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Now let's take
the roof replacement separately.
Chris, can I ask a question? Can I just ask a...
Yeah.
Just for clarity, I understood that there's a sequence of us with North Montgomery, with the tech center, about the sequence of our approval. I'm just trying to understand. You've approved it yesterday, and we're approving it. Is that the normal sequence? Is that the approval has to come from the board, North Montgomery County Technical Center? Or just explain the circumstances of two boards approving similar type amounts.
I don't think, I guess each situation might require some different procedural piece, but in this case, the issues and the rationale behind the delayed vote by the North Montco board was really related to the determination of the vendor who you would select, not necessarily what we were going to be assessed in regards to each district being assessed a cost associated with it. So this evening, while the North Montco has approved the vendor, we're going to be approving two specific items. One, to use some of the fund balance from the North Montco Technical Center as it talks in the resolution to offset the costs for all the districts, and then our share of about $67,000. So that's what we're voting on this evening. So it's really we could have voted to do that in advance of them deciding who the vendor is. But in other cases, there may be issues with sequence. So your question is well received in terms of, there might be matters that will require us to do something differently than what was before us here this evening.
All right, let's work on approving the treasurer's report that's attached. So may I have a motion to approve? List of bills. And the list of bills. So may I have a motion to approve the list of bills in the treasurer's report? Second. Any comment from the board? Okay, all those in favor? That passes unanimous vote, 9-0. May I have a motion to approve the North Montco Technical Career Center roof replacement resolution? Second. Okay. Is there any comments from the board related to that? Okay. All those in favor?
Does it have to be individual? Does it have to be individual votes?
No.
No. Okay. All those in favor? Any against? All right. That passes by a vote of 9-0. All right. Moving right along on to the personnel items. Mr. Harney?
Yes, this evening we have two compensated professional leaves for your approval. We have one uncompensated leave professional for your approval this evening. We have one uncompensated leave classified. This is an addition from last week's work session. We have three supplemental contracts for your approval and 5 additions to our classified substitute list, and the attached list of volunteers for your approval this evening.
All right. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items A through N? Second? Okay. Any comments? You want to come, Jim?
Bob, far as number 1 and 2, far as the professional development, that was approved based on that it was going to add something to their teaching ability for the curriculum that they teach?
Well, that's twofold. Once a professional has reached 10 years of service, by school law, they're entitled to apply for a sabbatical and take a sabbatical. We have a board policy that outlines what that process is, and that process is that they do approve a submitted plan, and we review that plan to make sure that it does coincide with and will enrich their duties, and it's not something extraneous, that is applicable to what they do.
Now, you mentioned earlier that they will receive 18 credits for this. Is there any change in their pay scale as far as how they are looked upon?
The credits could be used towards column movement. They get half salary during this period of time. That's, again, school code. So these credits could be used to advance them on the on the salary schedule as far as their level of college attainment.
Do we know if that's would happen in this case, or how that would?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know where they stand right now as far as their credits.
Any other comment? All right, all those in favor? That passes by a vote of 9-0. Now let's turn it over for the curriculum programs. Dr. Katona?
Thank you. The high school math curriculum is up for your approval. This was reviewed at the Education Committee and last week. And just a note on the modifications, that the modifications were to the format for the board, not to the actual content of the curriculum. And I also have on here the textbooks available for review, which again would be out for the next month until our April regular board meeting, at which point we would be asking for your approval. And we do have a process in place for any community members who wish to come in to Farina to view these items and leave feedback.
Thank you. Now, may I have a motion to approve the high school math curriculum? Do I have a second? Any comments from the board on it? All right, all those, Jim?
I just hope, as we discussed at our last meeting, that we give the right tools to the parents where they can go online and see the instructional manual for the lesson plan for that day. That way the parents don't get frustrated with the new type math.
Any other comments? All those in favor? All right, that passes by 9-0 vote. Now, moving right along, let's move on to the policies with Dr. Zerbe.
Before I go on to the first reading items, I know which policy, I think you're right, is it immigration, migrant?
No, it's 103.1, non-discrimination disabilities.
We had 3 non-discrimination policies up. I was under the impression that 2 of the 3 were held back and 1 was moved forward. But we can check our notes. What we can do is we will have a meeting prior to this next, the next meeting, and then we'll make any adjustments that the committee so suggests. But just so everyone knows, these are the 5 or 4 policies that are for first reading. We'll take comments on them at any time between now and, if you can get them to me before April 5th, that would be great. We could have them in time in preparation for any suggestions for the policy committee. But for your action this evening, under letter B, the second reading, we have 8 policies, and at the first one, the committee profiles. It's my understanding that we've received only 1 comment from the board relating to the education committee profile. We made those corrections, and we're asking for your approval of those 9 items this evening. And that ends my report.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading policies as listed? First, second. Any comments from the board related to this? All right. All those in favor? That passes by a vote of 9-0. Moving on to Dr. Zerbe and gifts and donations.
Thank you. Under gifts and donations, we accept the gift of the Philadelphia Flower Show tickets from Susan Walters, Pennsylvania Horticulture Society for Eagleville Elementary School's Environmental Club, a value of $560. And under trips, approve the Arcola Science Fair team and Methacton High School Science Fair Club to Penn State University and State College. The competition on May 15th through the 17th, cost of the district substitutes. I ask you for your approval on those 2 items this evening. Yeah. Okay. So the last item is letter C, commencement exercises. As I mentioned earlier in the public comment section, I'm recommending an adjustment to the wording on the recommendation. So as of this afternoon, there were suggestions from the student body, the government body that works with Ms. Landis on the setup of the graduation, and they recommended somewhere between 5 and 3. I'm recommending, based on my conversations with the principal, that we land in the middle there with the 4 o'clock graduation. So that would then read, approve the commencement date of June 10th, 2016 at 4 p.m. for the Methacton High School class of 2016.
All right, thank you. So may I have a motion to approve the gifts and donations on the trip as presented? First, second. Any comments from the board on those? All right, all those in favor? That passes by vote 9-0. Now on to the commencement. May I have a motion, and I'll read the whole thing just so we're clear on the time and everything.
Yes, please.
May I have a motion to approve the commencement exercise on June 10th, 2016 at 4 p.m. for the Methacton High School? Do I have a second? Any comment? Jim?
Dave, on the 10th, is there any school on the 10th, or is the actual last day the 9th?
The last day of school as it currently stands today is the 13th of June.
So the seniors, will they attend class on the 10th?
There's a modified schedule the last week of school for all students in the high school based on final exams. So I can't tell you at this moment in time which day, but potentially they could be in for half a day. But likely for the 10th, if they're in it all on that day, it would be for commencement exercises, which we get a full day of credit. For that.
The only reason why I ask that is if you had it on the Thursday the 9th and you had the required hours in on the 9th and you had it at 4 or 5 o'clock or 5 o'clock that day and had the rain date as Friday the 10th, I just think with the fact that we have the new field, the lights, and it would be the first graduation with both of those, I think it would be really important to do that rather than bring them inside without a rain date.
Just real quick, it's my understanding from our discussions, though, we wouldn't have the required amount of hours without including Friday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I seem to recall in previous conversations, we had also talked about reserving the possibility of adjusting the time for graduation if necessary for inclement weather. So, for example, if it looks like there's a better chance of rain at 4 o'clock, but it looks like the chance of rain goes down at 6 o'clock, that we may push the time of graduation back in order to make every effort to have graduation outside. Is that still part of the plan?
That was originally part of our conversation. It currently is no longer part of the conversation. So we will have graduation at 4 o'clock. It is the plan as being recommended today.
You had brought up last month, or last meeting, I can't keep it straight, sorry, previously, that you've looked into other districts, and I've heard from people now that I'm a school director that District A does this, District B does this. So possibly for the future, we might want to, I know things are set the way they are now, and I do understand that possibly for the future, whether it be able to next year or the year after, possibly now we can get something more set in stone for a rain date, since we now have these new fields. You know, I realize we can't do to certain things this year, but possibly in the next year or two, this problem can be solved, if it's not possible this year. or a set date like you've discussed with other districts. Just a thought, since it's a big deal for people. I didn't quite understand having younger children, but all my babysitters who are seniors have been in my ear discussing the importance of it for different reasons, and I've heard from parents. So I think coming forward, if this can't be settled this year and this is the best we can do, and it looks like this is the best we can do, that hopefully in the future we can look into some other options.
Any other comment? All right, all those in favor? Is that everybody? All right, passes by vote 9-0. Dates for board members' calendars, we have the April 13th, the Property and the Finance Committees. April 18th, we have the Education Committee. 19th, we have April 19th, we have the Property Committee, or Policy Committee and Working Session. Then April 27th, we have our next board meeting. Old business, we have 2 items under there that we have listed. We have the Transportation Improvement Plan and the budget update. We didn't get a chance to cover those at our last work session. We had such a lengthy and good conversation about the new curriculum and all that, so we moved that till tonight. So let's pick that up.
If it's okay, Mr. President, I'd like to start that conversation off and kind of rehash where we left off. So I have just a few comments I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. Last week at the monthly work session of the board, Mr. Whiteleather presented a plan associated with the potential savings with our busing operation. He summarized the presentation with a focus on the plan going forward. The Finance Committee will continue to receive updates on the progress and will be bringing recommendations forward to the whole board to consider when appropriate. This evening, I'm not asking for the board to take any action this evening, nor did we ask for that at the work session. But I needed to keep everyone informed and to really to put into context the $250,000 potential bus savings item that is listed on part of our next discussion item under the budget status. So before I go, or we go any further into the budget discussion, I just want to make sure that there are no other questions at this point from board members regarding the bus improvement plan. Are there any questions at this time? If not, then I'd like to go into the budget. So a printed copy of last week's budget presentation is provided for each member. There are several copies on the table for members of the public. So Mr. Whiteleather gave this presentation last week, and it was the same presentation we gave at the last Finance Committee meeting that Mr. Ryan had spoken of. But having given the entire board the budget update presentation last week, it should be clear that the total mandatory cost subtracted from the overall proposed budget leaves approximately $4.9 million, or 5% of the budget to wrestle with year in and year out. This 5% includes such items as student materials and texts that are needed for instruction. We have cut our building budgets down over the past 4 years, and quite frankly, there's little room left without becoming ineffective. As such, this is a significant problem. Act 1, which is the budgeting process that we go through, squeezes district resources, and it is unfriendly to the long-term sustainability of programs and services as we know them, without consideration for revenue increases to offset the mandatory costs that increase annually. We presented 3 budgetary scenarios in the presentation, and if you turn, it's the actual last piece of paper on the presentation before you. It says 2016, 2017 budget scenarios. While we've presented these scenarios, I don't think any of them satisfy all our constituents. No scenario specifically addresses STEM or any other highly recommended initiative that are commensurate with the conversations among the Strategic Planning Committee. Each of the 3 scenarios suggests that we maintain the status quo. Each scenario assumes that the board will approve the debt restructuring, that they will get 15 retirements, and that our transportation evaluation savings will yield the designated reductions. And I mentioned what that was. That was approximately $250,000. As the educational leader of the district, I have considered all that we must address and have considered the demands of our community and the need for us to maintain the level of excellence. I have considered the matter of potential school consolidation, pending tax appeals, and future fiscal forecasts, as well as the absent state budget. As such, I recommend scenario A, which if you don't have it in front of you, I'll review it. Scenario A talks about a budget short of about $3.8 million, where if we had a 2.4% tax increase, which would approximately yield about $1.6 million, and we take the retirement tax exception, that would yield about $887,000. The budget short would then be at approximately $1.3 million. If we do all the three things that the administration has recommended, doing the debt restructuring at $575,000, an early retirement incentive program at about $300,000, and a bus route evaluation at $250,000, a budget short under scenario A, with all potential tax increases and those three areas, we'd be left with about $188,000 short, which we believe through some other means we can address rather appropriately. Scenario B and scenario C are similar to scenario 1, except scenario B suggests that all the things are considered, but no use of the PSERS tax. And the last scenario suggests no tax increase. So in the last scenario, if we took no tax increase and we did the debt restructuring and the early retirement and the bus route evaluation, we'd be at a budget short of about $2.67 million. So at this point, I'm recommending that we look at scenario A. However, if I should be directed to focus on scenario B or C or some combination thereof, then I will need to do the following. First, as part of our regular practice of reviewing undersubscribed courses at the high school, enrollment and program participation at all levels, I will review and recommend the curtailment and alteration of programs, putting forth the process under the law that allows for this action, which we have been monitoring yearly but have not acted upon. The curtailment and alteration of programs may result in the furlough of instructional staff. Second, I will review and recommend the curtailment of support and administrative programs and services. This as well may result in the furlough of support and administrative staff. And lastly, I will continue to seek alternative solutions to address the board's direction on the scenarios presented. Next, it's important that I share some additional information with the board. I am making the board aware that if the curtailment and alteration of the educational program were to occur, resulting in professional staff reductions, Section 1124 of the Public School Code suggests that the following occur. First, the first step would be for the superintendent to make specific recommendations to the board with regards to the reason for the curtailment and alteration and the number of positions to be suspended. The next step in suspending professional employees as a result of curtailment and alteration is for the board to pass a resolution that sets forth the grounds for suspension and states how many positions will be suspended. Once passed, the administration would then notify the specific employees who will be suspended. Those employees would have the right to request a hearing to challenge, 1, the grounds for the suspension, and 2, whether they were properly selected for the suspension. And pursuant to Section 1125.1 of the School Code, suspensions in this process must be based upon seniority and certification. So please understand that one cannot assume that one program curtailment or alteration is equal to one professional staff member, or to the furlough of one professional staff member. The level, subject, and number of sections, among other matters, may play a determination in the calculation. However, to illustrate the matter, if, for example, scenario B is the path recommended by the board, it could impact as many as 14 or more of our professional staff. This means that in general, as an example, the 14 leased senior staff are nearly equivalent to about $1 million. This would effectively have the educational program curtailments and alterations account for the fact that we may choose not to take things like PSERS or other matters that are suggested. Next, in keeping this information in mind and depending on the future direction of the board on the scenarios presented, I will provide my specific recommendations where needed. But before doing so, it is important to me and the morale of the district that we are certain of the path through which we proceed forward with. The board is being presented with this information so they can be best prepared. I recognize that the board is seeking options, and I know the board has the best interest of our students and taxpayers in mind. Yet, while I do expect some positives in the budget overall in the next several months, I do not have a way to address all the remaining budgetary short with cuts to the remaining 5% of the non-mandatory budget area. In the meantime, I am working on contingencies on all these matters, and in the instance that some of or all of the givens do not materialize, things like the retirement, the busing, those things that I've mentioned, we will have alternative options for. Lastly, I seek direction and discussion from the board, and now I ask if there's any comments or questions for me or members of my administration.
Stuart, I know Mr. Phillips asked this before. Last year, when correct me if I'm wrong, when it could have been a 1.1 when the act was taken, we were talking about $80 per household. Is that correct? And so this year, what per household does 2.4 plus the PSERS look like? Or
the Act 1, the 2.4% is approximately $121.07. 11 cents. I calculated and I gave it to the superintendent, so I'm going off memory.
Okay.
And the PSERS exception would be approximately $64.
$66.
So you're looking at, if we were to do both, it's $181 roughly for the average homeowner.
Just to be accurate, it's 185.77.
A few things. First, and this is something that our last board, and I was trying to get the board nailed down on setting its goals. And the reason why I felt it was very important for the board to have goals is to give direction to the superintendent on where the district should go based on the board's goals. One of the areas was the budget. And that's something that I think that would help a lot in this process if the board has a goal, whether it's raise taxes, lower taxes, or freeze taxes. And the reason why that helps is the mindset. If we have a mindset that we're going to not increase taxes, well, everything we do, whether it's negotiating contracts, any type of contract, whether it's employment, whether it's for copier service. When we look at our budget items that we're trying to get the best deal for the district, and that's if we were going to decrease taxes or hold them the same. As far as increase in taxes, then we're not going to be too concerned about how we negotiate contracts, whether it has to do with employment, copiers, books. So I think it's very important that, A, the superintendent has an idea what the board goal is when it comes to budget. And I think it's also important for the stakeholders in our district to know where the board stands with that goal to the budget, as well as education. When I listen to Dave talking about furloughs and suspensions and how the students are affected and how we've already cut any kind of fat from our budget when it comes to books or supplies, that makes up we're balancing a $1.6 million budget on the last 10% of what we have out of the pie. Utilities, insurances, that stuff you can't do much with. Being that we're going into, looking at contracts and coming up across the board, not one particular group, but rather than see the possibility of people getting furloughed or suspended, I think if we had our goal on where we were going with the budget and what our method was going to be, how we looked at the budget, we would appropriately address those contracts. One thing that, instead of seeing people furloughed or suspended, I would ask them, hey, can we freeze? Can you give something back? I'm looking at the chart here, and if you look at scenario C, we're short $2.6 million. Well, if you take Peasers and salary, that's about 2.4. So we're about $270,000 short if we had no increase in Peasers or salary. If you look at the Act 1 plus Peasers, we're short 188. Well, if we didn't change our math program, which I'm glad we're doing because the last one was atrocious, we're close to saving that 188. So what's our goal as a board when it comes to budget? Are we going to strip things away from the kids?
Jim, can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
To have a dialogue a little bit. The 5th and 6th graders today are playing with Rubik's Cubes. It's not a one-sided Rubik's Cube from my perspective. It's an education Rubik's Cube. It's a budget Rubik's Cube. It's a land value Rubik's Cube. And to have one goal and more or less say the goal is budget and then whatever falls from that is not why I'm here. So from my perspective, you have to balance all three. So that's what we're discussing is balancing all three. And to provide some type of arbitrary goal around a tax increase based on something that's not based on facts related to education and land value, then you're sort of blocking yourself into a box. So you have to look at the entire Rubik's Cube and look at it in the best way that balances all the best.
Well, and I do. And I compare it to a triangle. A triangle is a very stable object. There's three sides. One is the student, one's the teacher, and one's the environment in which the child learns in. If you have a poor environment for the student to learn in, the student's not going to learn. But equally, if you have a student that's there that's not willing to learn or a teacher not willing to teach, the child's not going to learn. Nowhere in that triangle is money. You can go teach a kid under a tree as long as it's not lightning over the kid's head and he's not scared. He will learn. We're on an agreement. We're here to educate kids, but we also have 30,000 people in the district. We also have people that are hurting from property taxes. Quite frankly, if you're not looking at and worrying about the budget, eventually somebody will figure it out for you. Because when it comes time, if we're not good stewards of our budget, the state's going to say, you know what, any increase is going to go to referendum. And then the voter's going to decide. And you might not like what the voter decides, and then you're going to have to start stripping stuff whether you like it or not. So I would caution, and I'd be very careful with the budget, and looking at it's going to be healthy and taking control of it now, rather than letting the state say, hey, we're going to pass a law, it's going to go to referendum every time there's an increase. And then the voters keep voting it down to increase. And then we're here stripping books, teachers. So I'd rather have good conversations about contracts where if we had a 2 or 3% reduction in a contract and it saves lots of books, saves lots of teachers' jobs, and it saves people their home that they're living in and that they can survive. So I think it all falls in suit. It's not just about the budget. We're talking about the budget because this is what we have to talk about right now. Last week, we spoke about the math program. And we all came to the conclusion that changing the math program was a very good idea, considering how atrocious the last subject was. That's all.
Just to point out, Jim, the scenario B that Dr. Zerbe talks about is 14 potential additional staff. Included in scenario A is already 15 retirements, non-replaced. So scenario B by itself, based on that, realizing that you want to look at other alternatives of how to approach that with the unions, but we're talking about 29 less educators and administrators in the process. So just to make sure we are making significant cuts in this status quo scenario A.
Well, the last teacher's contract I voted for. And the reason why I didn't vote against it was because the board didn't ask the one question it never has asked, and is that whether or not they would consider giving something back. For instance, if they took and gave us 2.5% back across the board, would that mean, and Stuart would be able to tell us and Dave would be able to tell us, would that mean that we would not get rid of any teachers? We wouldn't have to force any early retirements, and life at Methacton would stay the same as it was last year? I'm more than willing to ask that question if it means that life at Methacton stays the same. And it was just as simple as asking that question. And they could come back and say no. But at least we did our job and asked the question.
Kim, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I can't imagine how life at Methacton would still be the same if we're reducing the number of educators or if we are asking our educators to basically forego a salary increase that was promised to them in contract. I don't see how that could keep things the same from their standpoint.
Well, we're talking about a new contract. We're not talking about changing their old contract.
Well, let me interject since I was next anyway. Go ahead.
One last point. Life at Methacton, if it means that they're giving back, you know, the general public that works, that's not governmental, they've taken huge hits over the years in their retirement, whether they even have a job, and their income. The only jobs I know that have gone up and got more vacations and more salary is government jobs. And eventually, there's no growth here anymore. At one time, we were getting 4.5% growth in the county and even in this school district in revenue. And that's not the case. It's dropped. So times have changed. But when I say life in Methacton, when I say we ask for something, you know, and if we got it, and it meant that we didn't have to furlough or get rid of teachers through suspension, or even close a school. For instance, scenario B, if we close that school, we're closing that gap. But, you know, that's...
I think we're misunderstanding. I think, and I could be wrong, that Mr. Phillips didn't exactly mean what he said, but I could be wrong. In terms of this, we're talking about the budget for next year. Contracts are done for next year. They're written. And I don't know every single detail of the contract, so I don't want to misspeak, and you're speaking in generalizations, because you're right. Some people have taken a hit, some people have gotten raises. I can speak right now, my husband's in the corporate world, he has gotten raises. So there have been people who have received raises. And I know the teachers did take some freezes, or no steps. I know they changed their health care, and I don't think it's worth going into the past, because we could, talk about the no tax increase last year and those kinds of things that affected this year's budget. This is the budget we have for next year, and we can't change any contracts. And I know it was not easy for Dr. Zerbe to bring up furloughs and suspensions, because it's a tough topic to hear. But I think people are getting a sense from you, and maybe you don't mean this, that education isn't the most important thing. And I just sat at many public, the school board trainings, and the first thing they said to us over and over again was that your main priority is education. That does not mean we have a blank check. But it felt really good, because I came here as a teacher and educator to protect Methacton's education and our district as a whole and our land values, with knowing that I don't have a blank check, but that when they reiterated our first goal is education, I think that's what we have to keep in mind. Do we have to be smart about our money, and way smarter than we've had to be 10 years ago? Absolutely. And that's why we're here discussing it.
How about we let
Can I?
Yes.
let somebody else.
Okay. On a different angle on this, Dr. Zerbe, can you let me know or tell me about the CPO salary? I know that the CPO salary was figured into this current budget that we're in now. Can't recall how much it was, but I know it was in excess of $150,000, approaching $200,000 with benefits. And is it currently programmed into the current 2016-17 budget?
Yeah, very good question, Mr. Roth. I've communicated with the board on that matter regarding the CPO. We had approved back in, I believe it was September. June of 2015 for reclassification of one position and then the creation of another position. We went through a procedure to advertise, and we had about 42 applications. We had 12 finalists. Of those finalists, they were all interviewed, and of those 12 finalists, we could not find a person to fit that position. At the same time, or shortly thereabout, we were developing the budget, which is partly before you here this evening. And as such, I put a hold on moving forward with the hire of that position. So to answer your question, maybe in a roundabout way, but I thought historically you should know where we are with that. It was about $240,000 total with salary and benefits.
So it was $240,000 per year, correct?
That's correct. And that is, and to answer the other part of your question, it is built into the budget as it's presented to you here this evening.
All right, then, protocol aside, I don't care what it is, I'm going to make a motion that that position be permanently, or not permanently, but temporarily eliminated out of this current budget, the 2016-2017 budget, that the CPO position be removed, line item removed from this budget. Also, the excess of $240,000 that was in the 2015-16 budget be carried forward into the 2016-17 budget, therefore creating $480,000 towards your 1.07 million of scenario B. Does that make any sense?
Well, the sense is that, we eliminate the position out of the budget, which would then free up an expenditure reduce the expenditures by $240,000.
Correct.
So we could do that, and then offsets somewhere in here.
Right. And I understand that this current budget cycle, we won't know the actuals of surpluses and all that until after the audits and stuff like that are done, and I understand that. However, in figure, at the very least, you can take $240,000 out of the 2016-17 budget by taking the CPO position, since it is on hold, out of the budget until the board feels that we can afford it, quite frankly, because I don't think we can afford another high-level administrator right now.
Well, Mr. Roth, I mean, your point's well taken, and that's why, my concern is that is similar to yours, and that's why I haven't moved forward with the position. And therefore, it was actually on our agenda for Mr. Whiteleather and I to bring that recommendation to the board at our next Finance Committee meeting, but you've jumped ahead, which was fine. And if it's the board's wish, we will certainly do that. But,
Okay. And I did not make an official motion on that front, by the way. It was a hypothetical motion.
Well, yeah, so what
But, I mean,
so what
I
I'll
think
do
the
is I'll
board-
bring that forward to the
Yeah, it
Finance Committee.
needs to go through Finance
and our
first.
next revision will show the budget with it in and with it out.
Okay.
Is that fair? And then the Finance Committee can give us, further direction on that particular item. Is that fair to the board?
Sure.
Finance Chairman, I'm sorry. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. And just to speak to that a little bit, and, this is just kind of looking into the previous finance meeting, Mr. Roth, since, you're not part of the committee and you weren't in attendance in the public, but part of the issue with the current budget of this year is that the district is trying its best to not show a deficit. The deficit was discussed as being a possible negative impact on our credit rating. We are automatically going to show a deficit of, I think it was the $835,000 that we used out of for the fund balance. So in terms of trying to meet that number now and shrink it down, we have a huge number to meet. $240,000 is just a little part of that. And then these are things that, if they had done...
I disagree, Mike. That's 25%. I agree, and I'm not done either. I'll let it be known that if I need to come to these Finance Committee meetings, I will make sure I'm there.
And I'm just speaking to part of what you said. That's why I was responding to what you said.
Because I'm not taking this lightly, and first of all, for those of you who weren't on the board at the time, the CPO position was presented through HR committee, okay? It was budgeted even before going through HR committee, which is understandable. I understand how that works. It did get presented to the full board, and it was put, obviously, for review. That being said, a lot of that was done before our budget, these budget scenarios were invented, okay, were created. And, you can turn the numbers inside and out and take the fund balance of this and the fund balance of this, and you can create it. I understand that. All I'm saying is that the $240,000 a year or thereabouts, okay, needs to be pulled out of the proposed budget, okay? As far as this year goes, where it lands is anybody's guess, okay? That's all I'm saying, okay? My second position is the SRO agreement. Our school resource officers agreement is going to be coming due January 31st, 2017. According to their contract, we have until June 2016 to either written notice 180 days prior to the expiration of this agreement to the other parties so that they intend to not renew or extend this agreement. Such a notice is given for the express purpose of effective budgeting and staffing to fulfill the obligations of the agreement. Totally agree, but hey, where are we now? We're at the end of March. We have 2 months to decide on this, and with this board, there's a lot of people need to get up to speed on this. Now, my issue with the SRO program is not the program itself, it's the funding of the program. It's expensive, okay? Don't have current dollar amounts because I couldn't find them in my notes.
It's about $300,000.
Okay. And who pays for that? Like, Lower Providence pays any portion of that?
No, the district pays the $300,000 for basically 2 officers to provide services to the high school and to Arcola, and the rest of the district, but they're stationed at those 2 buildings.
What I would like to do is entertain the idea of sharing the cost of this agreement between both townships and the school district equally, all 3 of us. All 3 townships benefit from this program immensely. If anybody does not know what the program's about, see the superintendent, okay? I mean, I don't want to take time now to talk about it now because it has been proven that it is a worthwhile program. It works. It's an incredible thing. However, the time of experiment is over. We all know it works. It's time for the townships to start paying for this as well as the school districts. It's benefiting the townships. We're employing Lower Providence Township officers who then are on the Lower Providence Township duty, when they're not here, okay? I'm not sure how all that billing works, okay? But I do know that we pay a good portion. We pay for everything, the uniforms, everything. Now, I understand that Worcester Township has been reluctant to even shed a nickel on this thing, okay? So I will do my part into trying to go to those township meetings and trying to primer them and let them know that this is coming down the pike. As a resident of Worcester Township, I firmly believe, and having 2 schools in that township, one of which is the high school, which benefits probably the most out of all the schools, maybe let alone Arcola. I definitely believe that they need to start ponying up the dough for this. I mean, if it's $100,000 for each, so be it. Maybe we can come to maybe it's 50, maybe it's 20. Something needs to come from the township level.
So, Mr. Roth, if I could just jump in there. So the statement about Worcester not interested in contributing, I heard, this program started before my arrival. So I heard that similar statement as you repeated it here. But I will tell you that, just to be fair to Worcester Township, I have not asked them either.
Well, your predecessor has. Okay. And the part of the problem was because Worcester Township had a different direction to the program. They wanted to use state troopers instead of Lower Providence. And that's how far back this thing goes. That being aside, we all know the success rate that this thing has had. And I just think that the board needs to, I don't know what committee you want to throw this through, finance, property, I don't know. But we need to jump on this and start working on this, because this could be a part of the budget that we could have. I mean, even if it's $100,000, it's another $100,000 off that shortfall that we're looking at.
Yes, so just to add on to Mr. Roth's comments, the administration, as I said earlier, we are working on certain other aspects, and the SOF program was a part of our conversation. I can't tell you into any great detail where we're at with that, but if it's the interest of the board for me to pursue the recommendation of Mr. Roth, I can certainly do that. It seems reasonable. The program is important to the district, but he's clear, as well as I said, it's $300,000. I mean, it's a lot of money. And if the board would like me to make those conversations occur with both townships, I'd be glad to move forward with that. I just need some direction.
Why wouldn't we?
Here's another option. Oh, sorry, I apologize.
I'll take a little time. Why wouldn't we have you do that?
I don't know why you wouldn't have me do that. I'm asking you. Again, I inherited the program. The program started as a complete funded program. So there were state monies under the Safe Schools initiative that paid for those officers for a certain period of time, and then it went down to 50%, and then it was zero. And it's been zero for at least the last 3 years, if not possibly 4.
So when it went to zero, why didn't we reevaluate how we look at funding? You might not have been here when it went to zero, so I'm not quite sure.
Not when it made its actual transition to zero, but we did renew the contract for 3 years, and I did present, and we've had conversations with the board on that. I can't tell you why, but we can talk about why it wasn't done, or we can give me the direction and say, Dave, go do this.
I mean, it seems to me that... Sure.
I understand that it moves out of our budget, but it doesn't move out of the taxpayer's budget. So from a perspective of right pocket, left pocket, you're not doing anything from saving taxes other than taking it out of our budget and putting on Lower Providence and Worcester.
We don't know that necessarily. They may have budget capacity in certain areas. Okay? I mean, you're making that assumption. We don't run their budget. We run our budget, Paul.
I can give you an idea.
Can I stop? This anger, I so appreciate Herb's ideas. Your ideas and thoughts are fantastic, but you're being extremely angry. And it's not good models for our children who are watching
Andrea,
this.
I'm not getting angry. I'm asking questions, which I think we're all entitled to do. I don't think it's an anger. Trust me, that's not my angry voice.
Okay, is that your condescending tone? Is that your condescending tone?
Listen.
Can we just continue on with the discussion?
Worcester's budget.
I think everybody, can I try to draw this conclusion? I think everybody agrees that there's something to look at here with the SRO program. It's a $300,000 expense. We personally, all of us, don't know what the options are. We know right now there's a $300,000 expense, and we have 2 police officers that do things in our school. So I would like to give Dr. Zerby the direction, if anybody disagrees with me, please let me know after I say this, let's look into that. Let's understand what the options are. Maybe there aren't any options that are really going to reduce our costs. We don't know at this point, and we'd like you to have your team work on that.
Can I make one more suggestion about the SRO? And when you talked about options, it sounds like from the past that Mr. Roth knows about, that this has been going on for quite a while, and it might involve townships, and we've got a deadline. I don't know the reality of this or the realisticness of this, but at neighboring districts, they have their own little police force, 2 police people, which did involve buying a car and things like that, but I don't know how much time there is, but when we talk about options, that might be less than $300,000, I'm not sure.
We extensively looked at all those options, and theoretically, the SRO program actually created a small police force within the boundaries of the school district, because we had to do that because of the fact that Worcester Township did not have a police force. They rely on the state troopers. So on the boundaries of the school district property, we have coverage that allows LP, police officers to come on Worcester Township property under the schools. So.
All right. Do you want to make more comments about the SRO?
No.
Okay. You do? Okay.
I completely agree with Herb's recommendation. The only question that I would bring up is, will it affect next year's budget? Again, this whole conversation starts with where we are now and when we need to have a proposed final in front of the board for voting. Can we get in front of both townships, have it approved on their side, and back to us in 2 months? I certainly agree that this is a great thing to look forward to going forward, but will it fit in the timeline that we are stuck in to hit next year's budget?
Well, I think that it's worth getting the conversations on the table as soon as possible and then getting back to you whether or not that can happen, because I may get feedback from one or both of the townships that that's not possible. But I think with the direction you've given me, we'll get the conversation started, and we'll come back with some alternatives. But nonetheless, I think we need to know what those alternatives are, so that if we need to make a decision by June 16th or June of 2016, prior, 180 days prior to the expiration of the agreement, we know what that is, and we can determine what it is going forward. I mean, there may be other factors. I mean, once we approach both of the townships, there may be other factors that they bring to the table that will allow us to make a change for next year. I just don't know, but I'll get in front of them and we'll see what happens.
One thing to note, back, just a little history. When we had the SRO started, the state police, if they had a call at Worcester Elementary or the high school, state police would automatically block off 2 hours for the officers, which means there would be no police in Worcester Township. So by us forming our own police department and hiring a Lower Providence or 2 Lower Providence police officers, that has benefited Worcester Township greatly, because now if we have a call at the high school, it's dealt with in-house, and they don't lose any officers off their streets because of what we've done. As far as their budget, their property tax, they bring in about $45,000 a year through property taxes, and then they bring $1.5 million in the half of 1% earned income tax, and they have about $750,000 a year in surplus. And they have close to $9 million in the general fund sitting there. So as far as Worcester being able to afford it, they could afford it. They could pay the whole $300, and they still have the state police on the streets in Worcester. If we decide to discontinue the SRO program, if we had a call at the high school or elementary school, the state police would go back to blocking off 2 hours at a time for that call, and there would be no officers on the street in Worcester. So, I mean, that's, it definitely benefits Worcester by us having our own police department and hiring Lower Providence officers. And that number that we're getting seems like a lot of money per officer, but we're not dealing with their retirement, uniforms, training. That's just one price and we're done. So, and that's probably fairly cheap compared to if we had to hire our own guys, train them, and deal with all the BS that goes along with it.
All right, Dr. Zerbe, so you have the direction to go look at that and look at alternatives, see what other schools are doing. If other schools are not, the majority of the other schools are not employing officers, why aren't they, and what options are they doing? Let's look at things. So part of it will be a good education exercise for all of us to review that, given it's a $300,000 a year expense. All right, can we move off of SRO now? I know Brenda's been eagerly wanting to speak about something, so.
Well, Herb brought up the CPO, which was in the salary budget, and I just wondered if we have a list of the assumptions that we're including in the salary budget that make up this budget, what types of increases that there are. And I know I don't fully understand exactly how you calculate the total increase year by year on the MEA contract. But I did a couple calculations, and it looks like it's about a 3.5% increase over last year, 16-17 versus 15-16. And so I wondered how that came about, because I know there are 2 contracts that are at least less than 3% that are part of our employee base. So I just thought it would be useful if you would give us the assumptions that you've included in the calculation for the budget on that line.
Yeah, I think we need to identify the, is that percentage as close to, is it 3.25%?
It's over 3%, and the reason why with the teacher's contract last year is that amount. Teachers took a mid-year step increase this year. So in essence, they're collecting half of their raise for the 15-16 year. The second half of that raise is impacted in the 16-17 budget, as well as a percent that's put on schedule. So nobody moves a step next year, but there is a percent allocation provided to each one of those salary categories. So the combination between that amount and the other half of that step increase translates into that 3% plus number for the 16-17 budget. All other, the confidential employees are 2%, MESPA are 2%, the custodians and maintenance are 2.3% for next year, and the administrators are on a sliding schedule from 0 up to 3%. Depending upon their evaluation by the superintendent.
So you would include all the employees that we have in the current year. If some of the employees who take the early retirement incentive, some of those positions could be eliminated as opposed to given to lower paid people, the newer ones coming in, would that have a significant impact on the amount that we would save And would you have a sense of how much that might be? Because, as Dr. Zerbe was saying, we can take a look at the low subscribed courses in the high school, for example, and if you see that you can save a teacher or two or more, conceivably, people who are retiring those positions, it could be worked out that you wouldn't add positions, or you wouldn't keep as many positions as you currently have this year.
Yeah, so I think that in summary, similar to the early retirement incentive that we provided last year, there was approximately 18 or 19 that did the early retirement, and out of that we only backfilled a certain number of those positions with newly hired staff. And so we were able to have a savings realized, and that's the plan that Mr. Harney, Mr. Whiteleather, and the rest of my administrative team is currently working on. We're working with the building principals right now, looking at classroom enrollments, looking at what the projected needs are going to be of staff. And it's possible that as we go through this early retirement, we don't necessarily need to furlough certain individuals. We just don't replace others, and it washes out in the mix. But at the end of the day, there's likely to be a reduction in total positions, both professional and possibly in others, depending on where we're at with these scenarios. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yes, but the $300,000, I think it's $300,000 number that you have there for that doesn't contemplate eliminating the positions. It contemplates...
That is correct.
Yes.
That is correct. That contemplates step something. What is it, step?
It's bachelor's plus 15, step 4 is where we place the replacement positions.
That also includes the years of the payout for the incentive.
Right.
So all those costs are included in that with the intent that we would fill all those positions. Our goal right now in trying to do the evaluation is to ensure that we first need to replace all those positions. And if we don't, and our enrollment doesn't show that, and our subscription to certain courses doesn't show that, or our need for a particular program doesn't show that, we won't fill those positions. And we'll be bringing those recommendations to the Finance Committee. We just don't have them today. So again, while I believe that this is the best we have for you in terms of the scenario, in terms of what we know about the budget today, it's likely to change once we have a better understanding of how this will all play out. And with our deadline of, is it May 1st, the deadline for the early retirement incentive? So once we get to that, we'll have, a more clearer understanding of what can really happen as a result of the early retirements and the need or not need to backfill those positions.
Thank you. I have a couple more. On the debt payments line, we have a reduction of $134,000 for next year versus this year. But with the refunding that we did, it said that we will save $430-some thousand next year. So what is the difference?
We have the amount that's in there for the ESCO project. The retrofitting of the lights and such that we've done here at the high school, as well as Arcola and Skyview, there's debt payments associated with that particular project. So those debt payments are in the budget, offsetting the savings associated with the refunding that we just completed for the 2009.
So the debt payments are in the debt line, and the savings are in the facilities line.
That's correct. You will see an offset of savings on the utility costs.
Right. Okay. So we didn't do a refunding for the ESCO project in the same way? It's not on our list, our chart of debt?
No, that's not one of the debts that are listed on that schedule provided by PFM last week. The lease is a separate debt that is not listed on that schedule.
Okay. And this is a very tiny item, but on the staff tuition line, I notice you have an increase there, and yet in the contract that I looked at, there was a decrease for the year 2016-17. In the MEA contract, it goes down in that year.
That is correct. The MEA contract does have a decrease in the tuition. However, that tuition line item is tuition for all of our employees, inclusive of administrative staff. So while there may be a decrease applicable to MEA, there is and will continue to be a cost associated with administrators who are continuing their education. So that line item you're referencing is inclusive of all of our staff, not just MEA.
Thank you.
First, a quick question. What's the latest update on the employee retirement program? I think the last time we were at 4 or 5. Have we had any more sent in like the last week since the work session or 2 weeks since the Finance Committee?
The status is the same.
Okay, so looking at this chart, and I'm just going over the things that are listed here before we get into anything above and beyond. So this was assuming 15, and we're at 5. So just a straight calculation, this 300 could, if no one else takes it, become a $100,000 savings. Is that correct? Roughly?
It could, but with the comments that we responded to for Ms. Hackett, that's the 15 is assuming that we're replacing. And so if we have 5 and the board approves the incentive for the 5, and they are not needed to be replaced, we're pretty close to the number.
Okay, but that was not the initial that we heard for the employee retirement was assuming that you would replace all, and then going forward, you would be looking at the possibility of not having to fill that, right? I'm just trying to go for the initial assumption versus what's built
Right, the initial assumption had to be that we would replace all because we didn't have the evaluation done of what the needs were. And we didn't know in advance of offering the incentive who the people would be that would take it. We only had an estimate based on the number of years of service that we could anticipate people having, but just because they have those years and meet certain criteria doesn't require them to participate. And so we basically factored in all the costs associated with replacing all the positions, and then it would be an additional benefit if it benefit in terms of finances to not replace an individual.
Okay. And then a lot of people have commented, but I think everyone's kind of either overlooked or they automatically assume that we're going to do it. I haven't heard any comments on the debt restructuring piece of this. Is this something that we're all unanimously doing? I would have thought that, during everyone's comments that this piece would have come up and they kind of would have said yes, no, because this is one of those things that the superintendent needs our guidance on. And I think that before we leave this table tonight, that these are the kind of discussions that we need to have. So some people have heard my talk during the Finance Committee, but I'd like to hear where everyone's at on that. And I'll have more questions later.
I'll jump in. Ideally, I would not be supporting the idea of debt restructuring, but I think under the circumstances we are in, I think I'm going to, from my perspective, I have to give the direction to Dr. Zerbe that we would have to pursue the debt restructuring as proposed last week.
On that subject, one of the things that we're doing in the budget, I think, is putting away $600 and some thousand, capital projects, money for the fields as they go on.
It's $1,117,000.
That we're putting aside?
Yes.
So personally, I wouldn't borrow money if I'm just putting some money in a different pocket. I wouldn't borrow money to cover my costs. And I know that we're going to have that money. Should we do that each year and incur $1.5 million in additional costs just so that we know that we have that money in that pocket at that point. It seems to me that with that $3 million payout that has to happen in 10 years, that's when the money will be needed, and, instead of paying $1.5 million in interest, we just use it then, and don't take it out each year. I think that's a possibility. So I would not be in favor of restructuring.
Should we go right down? Do you care to comment on no, Kim, or? Okay, that's fair. Anybody else want to comment on it? One word?
Sure. Listen, nobody likes to add debt on the back end. I think Paul brought up a good point that, given the options that we may be looking at something like that. However, I do think some analytics around Brenda's suggestion of, do we continue to put money aside while we restructure our debt and, balloon it at the back end, warrants, some calculations, some analytics, and maybe we could have Stuart and Dr. Zerbe do those calculations and give us an idea as we run out the money over the next X amount of years, what that would look like financially from a present value perspective. It seems like it makes sense. I mean, we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul one way or another at some point in time. Right, so we're either going to have to come up the cash later, or we do it now as a restructuring. The good thing is the rates are pretty good right now. So, you trade some things off. But I do think that would, looking at those analytics would give us something to kick around at the next finance meeting and understand and make a recommendation to the board what we trade off in either case.
With that suggestion, should that be something to just get some head nods here? It seems reasonable. I just don't want to go do stuff if everybody says no just because one board member suggested. But everybody good? Okay.
No,
we'll do that.
I think that's a good idea. We've come up with a couple good ideas tonight, the SRO and other things. So, we have a lot of moving parts here. And like I said at the last board meeting, I like having that refinance in my back pocket. It's nice having it as an option. It's not an option that I don't think anybody would put forward as don't do anything else, just refinance. I don't think anybody would suggest that, but I like that. And for me personally, if nothing else covers off on the budget, do we want to eliminate staff or refinance? We're going to have to make some decisions at some point, and it's nice that we have options. So, as we continue discussions, we'll probably come up, a lot of people here at the table are really looking at the budget and asking a lot of questions and a lot of good things. So I think as we continue the dialogue, hopefully we're going to find some more areas of investigation that potentially might create some windfalls for us and create more options.
One thing I'd say about the restructuring, it's going to save you maybe a little bit this time, but as time goes on, it just melts away in the budget, because what did the board do to correct or rectify any of the problem with the budget? And if everything keeps increasing 3-4% every year, that 575,000, that's a decimal point. And if you ran your home like this, do you think you'd still be in your house? Just start watching that movie, The Big Short, and that's what this is starting to look like. This is, we're just kicking it down the road. We're borrowing money because it's cheap, and we're going to forget about what the problem is.
So I had a couple other questions across the board, and I think one clarification. I think I heard at one point that if we furlough 14 plus the 15 this year, it'd be 30 educators less that we have in the system. There's nowhere in this budget contemplates eliminating those positions. I think that's kind of come up a little bit later. So the furlough would be 14. It's not 14 plus 15, right? It's just the people that exercise their rights to take the ERIP. The replacements would come in at a lower number, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's kind of a correction than what was said earlier. Then second thing that I have is we've asked for some historical information. I think we talked about 5 years in arrears of operating plan versus actual. And I think we really need this at the next meeting, because historically that will tell us if our operating plans and our actuals are aligned. And if we're traditionally coming in either under budget or over budget, I'm assuming we never come in over budget, but if we are coming in under budget a certain amount, like we might expect to this year, just if we look at the CPO position, we should be at least $240,000 less, which will mean that we would take $240,000 less out of the fund, right, theoretically. We won't need to transfer that much money over. So I think it's important that we take a look at the historical performance of our operating plans against our spends, so that we can form some opinions as to how we traditionally trend from a financial perspective in our operating plans.
And I know Mr. Whiteleather was working on that this week, and we just about have it ready for you, and we'll have it in advance of the Finance Committee meeting.
Perfect. Perfect. I think that will be helpful for...
It's likely to be available for this week's memo.
Great. Great. I think that's a big assist across the board. And then lastly, I know we talked about undersubscribed programs earlier, and I do think it would be beneficial for the board to see what programs are in fact undersubscribed, and undersubscribed by how much, because there is a value. I mean, any time you're looking at programs, whether they're educational or corporate programs or whatnot, if you're not utilizing those programs, there's a reason for it. Either there's not a demand, either they're outdated, whatever the purpose might be. There's only a few that are interested. And I do think we have a fiduciary responsibility as a board to make sure the programs that we're offering are ones that students would like to have. Or are signing up for. And if they're not signing up for them for a number of years in a row, then it seems like we ought to be evaluating the need for those programs, whether we decide to replace those programs with something else that's maybe more contemporary or different, or we decide to eliminate them. That's a different question. But I do think we should be looking at undersubscribed programs as a general practice across the district.
If I could just comment on that. So we've been doing that, I believe, for the last 2 years, possibly 3 years, and we I think under policy, I think it was class size policy 122 or something of that nature, we had there's some provisions in there that say by a certain time of the year, I believe it's October or November. I keep looking at Brenda because I know that we've worked on this policy together in aligning the needs of the board's information needs with also being able to assert any action if necessary prior to the students actually selecting courses. So we did do that this year. We looked at that, but in the last 2 years, what we've been doing, instead of actually furloughing staff as a result of some of the undersubscription, and there are courses that are undersubscribed, that would mean that there was less than 15 students in a particular course. Now, some of them on the list were identified as courses that were, didn't have the necessary resources in order to accommodate more than say 10 students, okay? But putting those aside, there were others that were looked at, and then there was some combining of the levels. So, for example, so that we don't talk about any particular program at this point, let's say there's an ABC program. And there's 3 levels to the ABC program. There's the beginner level, the intermediate level, and the advanced level. Well, instead of having 3 courses offered, they the high school principal combined all three of those courses into one course, and basically they use a technique to differentiate the instruction necessary for the appropriate levels. And that way it reduced the number of sections and the requirements. And a lot of those things were freed up as a result of some of the positions that we did not fill in the early retirements. So we have been looking at them, and as I mentioned earlier, we can do that. But if it's the will of the board, we can certainly look at that information again. I can bring it forward. We can, as part of the finance committee, probably again, and bring it to the work session if it needs any further discussion. But I'll have that information available.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Bob, could you describe what the process will be if someone is furloughed and what it means to them financially, and describe the whole process, what somebody would go through?
Well, it's an involved process to identify the least senior person within an area of certification, so depending on what classes, programs we were talking about. But the actual individual person is furloughed, and they are the first person brought back. The first person, say, out the door, as they say, would be the first person back. If we had to bring that person back for an area of certification, if the following year someone retired, that person had that certification, that person would be brought back. And we've done that several times here in the district. We've furloughed folks, but have brought them back when area of certifications that they had were available and in need in the district.
And what would it mean to the individual financially? Would they lose their pay when they're furloughed? Would they lose their benefits? Would they?
They're actually not employees of the district anymore. They're just in a category of rehire, but they're no longer an employee of the district.
Okay, so that's what we're trying to avoid. And you might have a nice teacher that's been around for 5 years, or I don't know when the last teacher was hired, but we'll say a 5-year-in teacher or a 10-year-in teacher. That's a very good teacher. And you have the possibility of losing that teacher in our district at that time if they decide to look for employment. And I'll say this to the board, this is why, say, if you look at all the employees, and if you were to ask employees, would you rather get furloughed or give up some pay and keep your job? I think a lot of people would say I'd rather give up a little bit of pay to keep their job. This is one of those things. I'm not into furloughing. I'm not into removing teachers from the job. Same thing with the bus drivers. That was something that, ask for something back so we can keep them as our employee. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but that was my position back then with those employees, to keep them as employees. And here we are again. But we might not be able to go back and negotiate an old contract, but going forward, we have to think about these things in depth. So when we're a couple of years out, we're not furloughing 20 teachers or closing a school or 2 schools because we're going to utilize things differently, and that's the way we control our budget rather than doing it based on utilization. So the budget, discussing the budget and having to understand what the goal of the board is, how we want to shape this district. And education, yes, we're all here for that. But when we're talking about the budget, that's what we're talking about, is the budget. But the way we're going right now with the budget, we're going to stop programs, we're going to end programs, we're going to get rid of good teachers because previous boards weren't good stewards of the budget.
Could I just make a plug for the Education Committee getting a shot at the undersubscribed programs as well as the Finance Committee?
I think that makes sense.
Actually, if I can get them, I know we have the materials. I'll try to get it for everybody, for at least have the data but we can put it on the agenda for both. Is that okay?
It is, and I was going to also ask, and I don't know the reality of this. I know we're spending $20,000 for the scheduling consultant to help us the following year. I just wish we could speed that up. I just feel like, I know it's a lot of work, but when, for all that money, I wish we could just get it faster.
Well, again, I need to say this in relation to that initiative. The initiative wasn't designed to reduce stuff. So, I mean, it's really designed to understand what this community needs and then put the most efficient and effective scheduling recommendations on the table for consideration, so that we can possibly have a better operation, be more effective and efficient. I'm not suggesting one way or another that we aren't effective or not efficient. It's just that we're inside our box right now, and we need someone else that has expertise to tell us whether or not our box is good or it could be better. And that's exactly what that is. And it could be better in a number of ways. It may not save us any money, but it actually could recommend reallocating staff that currently do X and move them to doing Y, so that we have better programs and services for our students. So we do want to go faster as well, but we can't hurry that process up, because it requires our staff participation, and it requires a lot of participation from people, and to hurry that would suggest that what we're trying to do is figure a way out of a budgetary problem, and what we're really using that for is determining whether or not we have the best and most effective system in place to meet our needs.
The only other thing I wanted to add, and I feel I deserve it, I owe it to the educators in this district. I'm not comfortable with the thought, I think it's fair to bring that forward since we're talking budget, of asking anybody to take a salary decrease. That might be for negotiations in terms of freezes and things like that, but I would not ever support asking any educator to take any more salary decreases. There's a cost of living everyone has to consider, and educators as a whole are not often respected in terms of, and I just want to make it clear, I'm not comfortable with that.
Have a nice night.
Thank you for hanging in there as long as you did. Are we done with the discussion around the budget? No. Okay. Are we getting close to the end of the discussion around the budget?
Everyone knows I have to ask my last question. So I guess I always go back to, what's kind of in front of us and next steps. So we have 3 scenarios in front of us. I'll work my way back here. Scenario C, no tax increase. If we take out the CPO, we're still looking at $2.4 million that we'd be short. And that's assuming that we do the debt restructuring, we have all the early retirements, and the bus routes does save us $250. So if we're talking about program cuts and professional employees and things of that nature, it was 14 professional employees for roughly $1 million. So we're at over 30 staff that we basically have to furlough or do something about to cover the full $2.4 million. Is that correct? And if we're talking in terms of scenarios here, Stuart? Yes? Yes. Okay. So in my mind, it's completely, again, I'll speak for myself, completely unrealistic, and I would never, ever advocate for that, especially ahead of the high school scheduling information that we're going to get. To me, it doesn't make sense to cut that many employees, especially without knowing what should be cut, and then we could just wind up hiring them back in the future because we cut too much, and what are we going to do now, and everything's suffering. So for me, scenario C is out. And the idea is that I would think that you want to wind up, somewhere between no increase to the Act 1 plus the PSERS. And to me, even trying to get to scenario B, maybe we could get to Act 1 from the things that I'm seeing now. I mean, if we're at $1 million short, we take out the CPO, we're at about 750. 750, you're looking at maybe 10 staff that you wouldn't have to do. But you're still talking about cutting programs, and is that where we're at? I mean, I know that we last year made the effort to, give back, not give back, as Candy would probably help me if I said that, because we didn't reduce taxes, but we kept it flat. Was that the right move? I mean, we know, and this is all just talking about 1 year. We all see what the PSERS increase is going to be next year. So we're going to be back in the same exact boat again. So does that mean we, again, start talking about furloughing teachers? Or, Mr. Phillips keeps bringing up the idea of going back and asking for, we'll say, 0% tax increases. Well, if I look at the salary line here, salaries including STS, it's a $1.3 million from last year to this proposed budget. I mean, that 1.3, and that's assuming that everyone, that's the teachers, that's the custodians, that's the administration, that's everyone decides that they're not going to do it. No step increases, no nothing. You barely cover our shortage. There's a little bit of plus there, but are we willing to do that? And the idea then comes, okay, maybe some would take 0% to keep their job. But aren't those same teachers going to be the ones who are looking for jobs in other districts? Where's the talk of, wow, because I believe we would probably be the only one that I've heard of, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, that have asked their teachers for a 0 going forward. And what's a teacher going to do? I know what I would do. I would look for a better job. I would interview everywhere else until I found an equivalent or, a slightly better job. I mean, that's what people do. They hop from job to job to find better salaries. And I don't want our best teachers leaving the district. So if you're asking for guidance, and I'll speak just for myself, and everyone can do the same thing, I'd love to stick as close to Act 1 as possible, but I am perfectly willing to go for the PSERS exceptions because I believe that what was done last year was a disaster, and the numbers are almost exactly right. The PSERS exception that we're seeking this year is $887,000, and that is pretty much the equivalent of the fund balance that we used last year. And I know the 0% tax increase was a great idea for some reasons that I won't get into. I don't think it was the right move. So in my mind, we're going for the Act 1 exception this year because of prior actions. So I'm giving my guidance as one board individual to try to fall somewhere between Act 1 and Act 1 plus PSERS.
One of the things, and I'm not saying go back and ask them for money this year. What I'm pointing out is, as we go looking at our budget and looking at a 5-year plan, looking at what contracts are coming due, even the superintendent's salary and benefits, we have to have a mindset of what our budget's going to look like down the road. As far as teachers leaving, I'll tell you what, if they have 10, 15 years in, and you said you're just going to give them 0 increase, I don't think they're going anywhere. I doubt, maybe Andrea could tell us some insight being a teacher, but I don't think, when I did a lot of door knocking, I spoke to teachers that were Methacton teachers back in the old contract. They couldn't talk openly because the way the union's set up. But a couple comments I had from teachers was just ask us. They know things will run out at some point. And you can't just tax to the point where you're paying, your mortgage is less than your taxes. I mean, there's a balance to everything. And all I'm saying is, when we look at these budget scenarios, think about what's coming down the pike and what we have to negotiate and what we should be opening lines of communication. I'm not saying go and negotiate this. Go have the conversation first. That way, it's not this headbutting when it comes time for contract. But I think this district is teetering that if Harrisburg changes some laws around and everything that's a tax increase has to go to referendum vote, things are going to be hitting the fan. And that's what scares me about this district. You know, we can change a course a little bit now, or we have to take a drastic turn down the road. And I'd rather take the gradual course.
I think what I'm hearing here is there's two different conversations that are going on. One is regarding this budget, 16-17, that's in front of us. But Mr. Phillips, I think what you're alluding to is a conversation that we have to have possibly at another time about what direction we're going to take moving forward. When contract negotiations come up next year, when we look to the future. And I think that's a valid conversation that we do need to have. However, I think to what Mr. Ryan was talking about, we need to talk about what's in front of us right here tonight, which is the 16-17 scenarios. And I agree, scenario C is just not an option for where we stand. I'm even uncomfortable with scenario B with what I'm looking at and the thought of having to lose 14 professional staff. I just keep thinking of what that would look like in terms of class size, in terms of programs that would be cut. And until we have more details about that, I can't envision how that scenario works well for our district and for what we want for the education of our children. The thing that is really concerning me is that all of these scenarios revolve around or incorporate the debt restructuring, the ERIP, and the bus reevaluations. It's $1 million that is not guaranteed. I know that it's not likely that all three of those things are going to fall through, but I am a firm believer in not counting chickens before they're hatched. I can't look at scenario A and see that that's only $188,000 short. I see that as a potential of $1.2 million because those numbers can't be guaranteed. So from where I'm sitting, I think that, I mean, we're definitely between scenario A and scenario B, and if I had to choose one, I would go with scenario A because I can't envision how losing 14 professional staff could possibly bring good educational outcomes for our district moving forward.
And just keep in mind, this exercise, the decisions, how you feel about it when you have to make those decisions down the road when it comes to contracts and thinking about the budget. I mean, and this is what I'm bringing out here. It's there's not one decision that's going to be a good decision. There's always going to be somebody unhappy. It's always not going to be the outcome that you expected. But looking forward, and that's why we, as a board, we have to look forward, and that's why I started off with, when we talk about superintendent goals, we should talk about our goals, and it makes it easier for the superintendent to understand what his goals are. That's all.
Well, and to that point, I think if we start looking to the future, when we're looking at the 17-18 budget, there's a lot of information that we'll have before us that we don't have before us now. Hopefully by 17-18 we'll have the 15-16 state budget done, but even that's not a guarantee. We'll know whether or not this bus route evaluation has net the savings that we're anticipating. We'll know whether or not we've taken advantage of the debt restructuring. We'll have the results of the high school scheduling program or evaluation, and we'll be further along in the process of school consolidation, and we'll know whether or not that's going to become a reality. So to me, we can only do so much in looking forward. I think that all we can do right now is look at 16-17 because the information that we'll have in front of us if in future budgets is going to drastically shape how we move forward.
Yeah, so I apologize for the misstatement on the head count related to the retirements, but I also wanted a clarification on the slide related to PSER's projections. So I know that this is probably not the best way to say it, but the PSER's exception, the capability of using the PSER's exception in future years when we go, the increase was $2.2 million for next year on PSER's, correct? And it's $1.3 million the following year. And then it drops down to $1,950,000 as projected today. So my understanding, the way that the PSERS exception is, it's a percentage that's available for you. So this is from a dollars perspective, and I know I'm going to get reamed for this, to be honest, but from a dollars perspective, this is the largest PSERS dollar increase that we could have for the next 5 years from an exception perspective. So to Jim's point of looking in the future of what we want and contracts and so forth, we do have visibility to some of the fixed costs that are coming our way already. And the ability to raise those revenues in the future will be less than they are in this calendar year. So I just want to point that out. We are making tough choices. They're not good choices. Not everybody, nobody likes making these tough choices. But the reality is that we will have less flexibility with the tax increase on the exception in the next coming years, especially after 17-18. So pointing that out to all the board members.
That is that is accurate. That's exactly the issue.
Can I just, one thing on PSERS, and Paul brings up a good point, but perhaps on this PSERS projection chart, we ought to not only show the increase year to year, but our projected portion of that, which is 50% of this number. It's a little misleading if people are looking at it and saying our portion is 2.2 million. Our portion is 1.1 million. The state reimburses 50%. So it is a little misleading how it's stated on here.
That's
yeah, just on the flow chart.
Not saying on the current Harrisburg budget.
Sure. We don't know what's going to happen in any proposed budget, but the current funding plan is 50% of this number.
Yep.
Any more discussion on the budget? I think we still had more discussion at the work session on the math curriculum. So I'm happy our discussion on the education side of things was longer than the budget one, but they were both a lot of good comments and a lot of good discussion. So without further ado, let's move on to the next. Under new business, any new business items?
I just wanted to thank all the educators involved with the Strings Jamboree. If anyone was lucky enough to go hear it and see it last week with 400-plus Strings students, grades 4 to 12, it was quite a sight. And the 4 specific educators plus all their educators that helped them, whether they're because kids are being pulled out of class or whatever the reason may be, it was enjoyable and an event worthy of this district and something that we're trying to just keep this district great.
Any other new business? I'll go on to mine. For 2 things I wanted to mention. One was I was fortunate enough to participate in the STEAMS program today. I signed up for the whole day, and I think I gave 7 or 8 presentations today. I was very happy that no kids fell asleep in mine, so that was my very simple measure of was it good enough to keep them awake, and it did. So I spoke about big data and analytics and how that's exploding in the industry, and shared with them that in 2014 the #1 job globally for new positions opening up was statisticians. So we're in high demand, and because of all the kids, and I explained to them, because of all the kids out there on Instagram and all the other apps, they're just exponentially increasing the amount of information out there that data geeks or data jockeys like myself have to make sense of for people. So there was a lot of good presentations there today. I talked to a few of the other presenters, and there was a wide variety of topics. The kids seemed to really enjoy it and listen to what are some options down the road for them. So I think it was a great turnout, and a lot of people. I'd like to thank all the other people that volunteered their time to go participate in that day and all the variety of roles that were required, not just the presenters. The other topic is I I mentioned to everybody at an earlier board meeting about our committees and how they were formed and the members. I just want to make people aware of that. Mr. Phillips contacted me and requested to be removed from the property committee. And it was really due to the amount of time he's putting into his work these days. He struggles to get to some of our meetings. He comes sprinting in at the last minute because he has to drive from wherever his job's taking him to. So I'm going to respect that, and I asked Mr. Roth to pick up as the co-chair of it, and he was gracious enough to say he would do that. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that change. Any other new business? Okay, then we'll move on to the courtesy of the floor. Back there.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What a fascinating discussion. I was talking to a woman who teaches in...
Excuse me,
my name is Robert Toporek from Team Children in Audubon. Anybody ever heard of Team Children? A couple of you? Okay. The Board of Supervisors, I've been here for 8 years. No one had ever heard of us, so... But I was talking to it, so you should count your blessings. I know that this is a arduous conversation. I just got a message from the governor that the legislature passed the budget and tremendously expanded public education. Anyway, she was telling me about a school in Philadelphia, and she said that the kids are writing with crayons, and that the teachers are buying pencils. So you have to count your blessings. Okay. Second is Team Children is a nonprofit organization in Audubon, and we are working on transforming the achievement gap and ending the digital divide. And we have distributed, over the last 15-plus years, over 15,000 computers, low-cost, high-quality, refurbished computers, to families, schools, and organizations. And I've been truly blessed by being in this district, by having many of your students as volunteers. We have one paid staff member. I'm really not great at fundraising. And so we depend tremendously on volunteers, and last Saturday 2 of your students showed up, and they're just awesome. Most of them are far smarter than I am. And I'm going to pass out some material so that you can know who we are and what we do. And Dr. Zerbe, I've been trying to meet with you for like 2 years now. I can't seem to make that connection. I don't know if it's me or you, but anyway. What I wanted to talk to you about, and what I want to talk to the board about, is at one time, I feel a little embarrassed to talk about this given the talk about the budget, but every year this district seems to recycle computers. Most districts go through cycles of computers. And in the past, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the district donated all the equipment that they had to Team Children. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've not been able to crack the code on making that happen again. So as you read this material, I'd love you to think about whether you want to have the district, again, donate the computers to us. And who the computers go to are 85% of them are low-income women throughout our region who cannot afford to buy a computer in 2016. So I know it's hard to believe, but the digital divide is alive and well, and with the rise of poverty, it's getting bigger. And we've also gone out of our way to help families in this district. Believe it or not, there are families in this district that can't afford to buy a computer, and we go out of our way to give them the best computers we can possibly give them. Okay? So, any questions? Comments? Good. Let me pass this out to you.
A comment. I'm aware of Team Children as our company used to have people recycle the process of computers going back. So if you ever go into the Team Children facility, which is over in the Valley Forge Center, it is remarkable the amount of equipment and half that they're refurbishing and trying to circle back and provide some service to. So I highly recommend looking into what Team Children does, no matter what Methacton does. But if you have a personal computer or any type of electronic related service or that could be reused for any student or individual along the way. It's a valuable program.
And if you've got some idea of how we could reach, I think that there should be no family in your district that doesn't have some people. And we have about 800 of them right there now. So there's no reason for any family not to have them. Thank you. And thanks for all your volunteers. Your kids are awesome.
And thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Candy?
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. Yesterday, I don't know if you're aware, yesterday there was a passage of Senate Bill 644, which is the steps towards revealing the price of union contracts before taxpayers are asked to foot the bill. The bill garnered wide support in the House with a 108 to 83 vote and returns to the Senate where it was passed last summer by a wide margin. So hopefully by next June in 2017, when it comes time for the teacher's contract, the taxpayers will be made well aware of what they're going to be asked to pay for before a vote is taken. And I think this is one of the smarter steps that was taken in Harrisburg. Now, I don't know when they're going to vote because they like taking their breaks, and it's a spring break, so we don't know how long they're going to be out, then come back and take another break for Memorial Day, so I don't know when it'll pass. I found it interesting, the comments that were made about the teachers' contracts. I haven't received a COLA increase in what I get a year. All my bills have increased, not by my doing. And I've sat in this room for 10 years, and I've had teachers stand at the podium and say, if they don't get a raise, they can't afford their mortgage. I would love to get every year, and unfortunately, I'm on disability. I got no COLA increase, but that hasn't stopped a lot of my necessary bills from increasing. And I know they think teachers have been disrespected. A lot of the teachers draw this on themselves. I understand your viewpoint that if we don't give them a raise, they'll leave. My sentiment is, let them leave. It says to me they want to be here because of the paycheck, not because of what they can do for the children. And our school teachers aren't paid that bad. They're not. But there has been a lot of people in this school district who have seen their salaries decrease and have not gotten increases, and our taxes keep going up because we have to pay salaries and benefits. And yes, they're angry. I'm angry. My taxes are going to go up. I cannot afford it. But yet, the teachers get a nice, they got a nice benefits, they got nice salaries. Great. They work hard for it. My daughter's an educator. I have a family full of educators. I understand that. But please, they're not hurting in the school district. You keep talking about their salaries. For 10 years, I've watched enrollment drop in the school district, and salaries continue to increase. And no teachers laid off, none put in furlough. But we have less students. I don't understand that. Our private business, if their business drops off, they lay off their employees. They can't afford to stay in business. The taxpayers can't afford this. I don't know how else to make this so you will understand. You're talking about the SRO program tonight. I'm glad Mr. Roth brought it up. It's been discussed every time it's brought up. Worcester will not pay their fair share. They have said in the past, no, they're not going to. If they have a problem, they'll call the state police. They wanted the state police to do the high school. State police wanted no part of it. Lower Providence police officers belong in Lower Providence on the road. That is what us residents are paying for. That's what they were hired for. I've been here since the beginning of the SRO program. It was fully funded. It was a grant. It was a, we'll try it out for a year and see how it worked. It's still here. And now the taxpayers are footing the bill. Chief Carroll's come in here in the past, retired Chief Carroll, and discussed the program so the taxpayers know what they're paying for. Maybe it's time the new police chief come in and give a detailed description of what we're paying for. But Worcester needs to start paying their fair share. Our officer sits in a school in Worcester. If there's a problem, God forbid, at the elementary school, he most likely will arrive there before the state police. But I'd like to know what the benefits we've garnered in this school district by this program. I don't, maybe I'm missing something. I don't think this is a bad school district where we need police in the hallways. Has the district looked into other security programs like schools across the country have, where they've hired retired police officers or retired military officers to come in and be part of their security? I mean, personally, I pay taxes in Lower Providence. I pay taxes for my police department. I like to have two gentlemen on the street 12 months a year. And I think this is something you need to look into. I didn't realize it was June. You have to decide by June for their contract to be up in January. Maybe you need to talk to the police chief, but this is something you need to discuss with Worcester. They can afford to pay their fare. Their children in Worcester are going to schools in Worcester and Lower Providence, and they're under the SRO program. They need to pay their fair share. This has been asked at previous board meetings, why Worcester wasn't paying. And basically one night the answer was, they don't want to. That's not good enough anymore. Lower Providence residents are paying their township taxes and their school taxes. We are, as residents, paying for the SRO program more than Worcester. So you might need to discuss it with the Worcester supervisors and see where they stand. But I think that would be fair to the rest of the taxpayers. And you need to, again, present it to the public and explain what the SRO program is in detail. A lot of people don't know. They just know there's a policeman in the school. That's all they know. To stop any trouble, if, God forbid, there would be. But Methacton is a pretty big school. So if he's at one end of the building and something happens at the other, I don't know how that, and Arcola is pretty big for one police officer. But I think that's what you need. I mean, this is part of our budget. This is another thing the taxpayers are paying for. So I'm glad it was brought up in discussion tonight. But these are, like I said, you know, I'm sitting here watching you spend money. And then come back and say, well, we got to pay for Peasers, we have to do this and that. People aren't getting that, how you keep spending money and then come back to the well for more money. I already see for sale signs going up in Lower Providence. And I know at least 3 people who are putting their house up for sale because they're anticipating a tax increase they can't afford. And they don't want to leave the school district. They don't want to pull their children out of the district. I would like to know what the increase in our federal lunch program is. I know the last time I heard was 2 years ago, it increased to 7%. Since I haven't heard any more, it means our lunch program has increased. That means our families are struggling. We have a snack backpack program. Previous board president said, well, that's a great idea. We want to make sure our kids have something to eat. I was stunned by that. I mean, I'm not naive. I know there's kids in the school district whose families are struggling, but that's embarrassing that we can't recognize that we have families that are struggling badly. A lot. They go under the radar. People don't want to admit it. But when we have to put programs like this in place, and I've heard for years, Methacton's a wealthy school district. Methacton's a wealthy school district. These are our realities now. But when you decide to increase taxes, whatever it is, these families are going to be affected, and their children. I mean, I'm fortunate my children are grown. I did hit rough spots, and I understand what it's like, but these are everything you need to take into question. My only thing is, I hope this Senate bill passes quickly, because it's time the taxpayers know everything that goes on in the contracts before they vote on them. And hopefully Mr. Ryan will go to Harrisburg and campaign for it. It was good to see you there. I told you privately, but I want to say it publicly. It was good to see you being the voice of the school district. So thank you. And have a happy Easter, happy Passover, happy spring, whatever your persuasion is. And see you next month.
Thank you, Candy.
Diana Carnop, co-president of MEA. And I guess your budget discussions and comments are hitting a chord. I'm I hit my 39th, I'll have 39.56 years in June. I'm one of those people that you want out of here, and I know that. My raise, I sent a text to Dr. Zerbe on the backpack program because I donated to that this year. I've spent more than my raise on all of your projects here. A lot of the teachers are doing that. I'm not meaning to single you out, Mr. Phillips, but you said that you've talked to my teachers and that you have asked them if they'd take a freeze. I won't tell you what they're saying now. They are unsettled, and the reason that they couldn't speak to you in negotiations is the very first meeting that you go into when you go into bargain, both sides sign an agreement that they're not going to go out and talk publicly. Or they would, on both sides, which can be counterproductive. In my long tenure here, I have Methacton employees, and I don't mean teachers, it doesn't matter which employee group it is. They have not been at the top of Montgomery County. Methacton didn't have the ability to pay at the top of Montgomery County, and the groups that worked here have understood that. The boards that have been here have been austere as long as I have been here. I know that it hurts to have your taxes go up. I'm a taxpayer. My mother lives in this district. She's 87 years old. She's one of your taxpayers. I get it. But we are helping to fund this school district. We're not outsiders. And before you come and ask us to take a zero, please look at what we have done over the last 10 years and even further back than that. These people have been taking a hit. And you ask if they would take a hit to keep a job? I don't think so. I think if they would have taken the hit to take the job, you wouldn't have your long-term subs employed through the subservice. They would still be part of our bargaining unit. And they didn't get the benefits that all of us got anyway. As long as I've been here, I'm one of the people, I can speak to what furloughing is. I know exactly what it is. I got furloughed when I was here. I was in my 5th year here. You moved 1/4 of the staff to try to keep people. And we got 5 people that were furloughed. We were fortunate enough, over time, as Mr. Harney said, we got our jobs back. This is not the first time that this district and these boards are going through rough times. And the ebb and flow of the population and other things that are impacting. It has gone on for almost as long as I have worked here. And you have cut, and you've cut, and you've cut, because you've had to. T1 went, AK went. You've done what you've needed to do to try to stay away as best as you can from the best of your programs and the most of your people. I'm looking at my bargaining unit numbers. My numbers have gone down. While you're not furloughing, you're not replacing either every year. So we're not that we're intending to offset it, but natural attrition, whether I have people that are pregnant, moving out of the area, want to be home with their families, or retiring. We are losing staff, and they are not all replaced. But when we listen to you talk sometimes, it's like we're the enemy. I would count how many of our teachers live in the district and pay the taxes here, or have family that do. Thank you.
One question. So you're saying that you'd rather see teachers get furloughed than a zero increase?
I'm saying that I do not believe my members would vote for a 0% increase, because there would only be a guarantee of 1 year, and down the road, it would happen again. They bought the deal on the long-term subs because they were subs. But they've already looked at their wages, and they've looked at their freezes, and they've looked at staying on step, and they are unsettled by it. They get what's going on in the economy. I have teachers who are not at the top of the salary scale that are hurting, just like the other taxpayers in the community. They're not all making the top of the salary scale. So I don't believe that they would decide at this present time to take 0 to save jobs.
Thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate it. Ashley?
I don't remember who said what, but I know there were several comments about staff reductions and how it correlates to fall in enrollment. So I pulled up the school data portfolio or profile that's on the district website, and it looks at data. The most recent one is from the 2014-2015 school year, and it goes back to 2010 to 2011. And it looks like the number of professional staff fell from 452 to 421, so there has been a decrease. I don't know if that's proportional to the enrollment decrease, but I thought it was worth bringing up. The support staff has fallen from 341 to 214, so I would actually question, is that a true fall? Have we contracted out for that, or are we perhaps even more disproportionately decreasing our support staff? And then the number of administrators has fallen from 32 to 29. So the net decrease, it would appear, over that period was from 832 to 664. So I bring that up mainly because I'd like to know what the impact of that is on the kids, because ultimately I think that's why those of us who are parents in the audience are here, and we do care about taxes, and we don't want to pay for things that are unnecessary, but we do all benefit, all of us in the entire community, from giving a great education to these kids who then hopefully give back to the community when they come back and want to stay here because of the strength of the district. So I'd just like to have that issue addressed as we're looking at the budgetary concerns.
Thank you. John?
John Andrews, Lower Providence again. I was happy to see the budget dialogue this evening. I think it's not the end of it. I expect the directors will be at it again in a similar fashion next month. And that's healthy from many perspectives. We all want good education, and there are people in private industry that they may go 3-4 years without a pay raise, and then their invention is accepted at the patent office, and the company starts getting royalties that go to the employees. So out in private industry, there are people that their pay might jump from $80,000 to $200,000 because of their performance. And there's a trade-off, of course, between tenure and everyone getting treated equal, independent of their performance. But that's not a subject for this budget. But tenure is a law of the Commonwealth among other states. Another law that we're subject to is Act 1, which came in, I believe, in 2006. And Act 1 has the index. It had a referendum that we voted on in 2007, where just about every place where that vote took place in Pennsylvania, a local earned income tax to support schools was voted down. There might be some fine print in Act 1 saying that vote should be redone every 2 years, but I think it died on the vine for whatever reason. And I mention that because you've got a lot of retired people in this community. When the supervisors in Lower Providence approved Shannondale, the big urge was that, well, we'd prevent putting up houses there with school children. Well, at Shenandoah, they don't benefit from the Homestead Act. I think they should, because they invest money to occupy that space, a considerable amount of money, just like the single-family homeowners do. They don't have a deed, they have a bond there. But getting more to the point of Act 1, it states that when taxes increase because of a bond issue, such as for building a new school, when those taxes are reduced, when those capital financing costs are reduced, the benefit goes back to the taxpayers in the form of a tax decrease. I haven't heard of that happening, but on the other hand, I don't think there are many districts that benefited the way we have from, number one, selling the 2010 bonds at the worst possible time, and now refinancing them at the best possible time. So, sooner or later, someone's going to go to Harrisburg and get a reading on who benefits from these refinancings, where it's the taxpayers who are on the hook. People in Methacton still see the recession. The Times Herald ads are running at about 6 per month, and the annual value of those foreclosures runs something like $15 million. So, yes, every community has foreclosures listed in the newspaper. Now, 3 years ago, when our tax rate was twice that of Upper Merion, our foreclosure rate was twice that of Upper Merion. Kind of curious. Maybe it's just coincidental. But, we make, over the years, we make concrete decisions on increasing taxes, and we made a concrete decision to hold them fast a year ago. Perhaps that was an unwise decision, and we're paying some now for that. Although you can look at it another way and say, well, it got us a new school board, and there's some benefit to that. The administration talks of cutting programs, whereas if there's a scheduling issue, you can keep, let's say, all the math programs and find that if you have 10 math teachers but you only need 9, well, then the decision is to furlough one teacher. And I don't think you can call that cutting a program. You're not changing what's available to the students. Whereas cutting a program is, let's say, cutting out half of the music. That's, that may or may not result in furloughing teachers. With regard to the SRO, I've heard numerous people say that the primary need for that is in the intermediate grades, 6, 7, and 8. That by the time the kids get to the high school, they've settled down a lot. And before we had the SRO program, we had what people would call rent-a-cop. And I don't think it ran $150,000 a year per employee. Maybe it ran $50,000 a year. So, you can adjust your needs there potentially. And with regard to the CPI, along with interest rates being low, gasoline prices coming down, they're not going to go back to $120 a barrel for a long time, because productivity of getting the stuff out of the ground has increased dramatically in many places. And people have given up on the idea of peak oil. So the CPI is low enough that Social Security this year, as well as in one or two recent years, have resulted in zero increases. And I just think that with regard to this MEA contract, that while CPI probably was not a discussion item, perhaps only the long-term subs were a discussion item, that maybe you don't ask the teachers for a 0% increase, but maybe you ask for 50% reduction in the increases. Again, you've got 6 foreclosures a month, and there's a lot of homes in the district that are hard to sell. So, you've got people who'd like to move out, but they can't find buyers because of the local economic climate. The pharmaceuticals are still cutting back. So, when the gold mine is gone, do you want to become a ghost town, or do you want to stay alive? So I hear, and I think relative to the scheduling that it's not a major effort. It's not 6 months of activity to determine whether you have some low-hanging fruit or not. And the scheduling analyses should be done every year, whether it's in a business or in a public school system. And we have a very good public school system, whereas there are other communities in Pennsylvania where we're paying a variety of costs relative to crime, et cetera, because those public school systems are not, in those public schools, they're not educating for whatever reason. It's not a simple thing, but we all want to keep the quality of our system, of our education system up here, and we should remember that there are many ways to do it, and not everything is mandatory. One thing that is mandatory is the 180 days, and Dr. Zerbe was respecting that in setting the graduation date. And relative to the replacing of teachers, Mr. Whiteleather indicated that the replacement teachers would come in at step 4, and I think that I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I think it's worthy of dialogue and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. It's really nice to hear the discussion about the budget at the public session and the back and forth about the different topics. It's really nice to hear that. One concern I have, the presentation of the budget, you won't find on here what the total percentage tax increase is. I think you should add a line here that says tax increase, 3.1% or whatever it is, because all you see is 2.4% Act 1, and then you see $884,000 exception. Put the percentage increase for the various scenarios, put the dollar increase for the average homeowner, put the average assessed value at the bottom for the different assessed values, and let's see the change right there spelled out. It's a percentage that we may not want to see because it's not popular, but you have to put it in there. So have the different topics down below and see what the impact is for the taxpayers. 3.1%, where you don't have to add these things together or figure them out. The other thing I have is, in the future, when you review the contracts for the teachers, the administrators, you need to get in there and pencil in these things like emergency room visits are covered. You know, that the district's going to pay it out, because you hear things like, oh, we have reduced the medical plan for the district. We went to a lesser plan for Blue Cross. But, you know, we didn't tell you that the emergency rooms are paid for over here for $1,300, or that administrators are getting $1,000 of uncovered medical expenses. You know, you need to go down that contract and see what's in there and what it costs and how many people are partaking in these benefits and how much it costs, because, you know, these are benefits like, you know, you have a medical plan, that's what it is. We're not going to pay you $1,300 to go to the emergency room. Maybe people won't go for a stomach ache if they know they're not getting paid for. The other thing I have is that I don't think we should use these consultants that we're using for scheduling. I think we have administrators with doctorate degrees, master degrees. You need to roll up your sleeves and get in there and figure out what the scheduling problems are. And you know, it's black and white. I don't think you need to spend $20,000 to have somebody come in. There's administrators here, and that's what their job should be. The other thing for bus routing, Mr. Harney took applications for a bus director, a director of transportation. You would think he's the guy that would look at the routing as a primary aspect of his job. And if he's not doing that job, then, you know, he needs to be addressed. That should be a major component of his job, reviewing the bus routing. I don't know, did we put him through any tests when he came through the interview process? Did you sit him down in front of a computer to see if he knows Bus Boss or any other kind of software? I don't know. I don't know what the interview process was, but we shouldn't be spending money for an outside retired business manager to come in and do those things. The other thing I have, and I just can't put my hands around this, doling out raises. Like Mr. Whiteleather got a raise of $10,000 granted to him from the prior board. He went from $150,000 to $160,000 a year. For the life of me, I can't figure that one out, okay? There is no more, we no longer have food service, and we no longer have transportation. And under the responsibility of a business manager is traditionally buildings and grounds, transportation, and food service. I can't figure out why he got a $10,000 raise from last year to this year, and is it in addition to the 2% that's provided in the contract, the administrator's contract? A couple years back, Mr. Harney, correct me if I'm wrong, received a $14,000 raise mid-year, retroactive to July 1. Okay? No longer does he have 180 employees made up of food service, made up of transportation. No longer does he have to negotiate a food service contract, a transportation contract, workman's comp claims, employee conflicts, maintaining files on people. You know, he doesn't send an email to the superintendent and say, you know, I lost 180 employees, maybe you should reduce my salary. Those things happened. Well, now it's going the other way. Okay, there's less responsibility, less people, less negotiating. It never goes the other way. But if I got a title that says assistant to the superintendent for human resources, a $14,000 raise is granted, and it's retro to July 1 of that fiscal year. Okay, so it went the other way. There's less responsibility, so you need to address the issue. You know, it goes the other way too. That's how I feel about that. It's just, you know, I just can't figure that one out. You know, looking at programs, I think the superintendent is responsible to look at programs and how they benefit the students. Is it pertinent in this day and age to have different programs? When I was at Colonial, we closed the planetarium. We got rid of family and consumer science positions. We got rid of microwave cooking classes, okay? Now, we filled the auditorium up when we closed the planetarium. We filled it up. There were kids, there were posters, there was, everything that it came with protesting against closing it. But we closed it. And that was done after review of various districts in the area, what's going on, what's the delivery of the science curriculum in relationship to the STARS. So you need to look at all those programs that may not be pertinent to what will help a student be successful in life. So you need to look at those kind of things. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add, there's a misunderstanding, I think, on the emergency room. The consortium changed the healthcare programs that we had and increased the cost to go to the emergency room. And the person who goes to the emergency room bears that cost because we wanted people to go to urgent care. We are not reimbursed for going to the emergency room unless you were admitted to the hospital. In that case, you now become an inpatient.
Okay. Are we done? Okay. Motion to adjourn. Second. Vote. Hey, nothing. Thank you.